in our city, those laws actually help Boston police solve crimes.
Thank you. Mr. Beer, question for you. I'd always thought that my Republican colleagues were strong supporters of state and local sovereignty and were against intrusion from the federal government. Do you think this lawsuit seems consistent with that position?
Oh, absolutely not. If you look at the Supreme Court precedent on this, it came from a gun control law that said that state and local governments had to cooperate with the federal government on gun control. The Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. Not a single member on this side, I believe, would be against that Supreme Court decision.
Mm-hmm. There is nothing illegal about protecting people's constitutional rights and due process, education, and equal treatment under the law. But it is illegal for the federal government to withhold federal dollars that these cities' taxpayer dollars have gone towards. Mayor Johnson, Chicago ranks as one of the largest cities in the U.S. and has the third largest metropolitan economy, boasting a GDP of $860 million. This makes it one of the most economically diverse cities in the nation, correct?
That is correct.
Would it be fair to say that your city generates billions in taxpayer revenue and that the average taxpayer in Chicago and Illinois contributes more than around $20,000 in federal income taxes, which is more than $1,310 above the national average?
That is absolutely correct.
So can we conclude that Chicago residents pay significantly more in taxes than they receive in return, contributing at least $5 in taxes for every $1 they get back in federal support?
More than our fair share.
Thank you. Only 9 states have taxpayers that contribute more to the federal government than they receive. All 4 of our mayors are from states on that list. Yet Republicans are saying that they should lose that money because they don't agree with their dear leader. Trump and Republicans are attempting to take money from blue cities and blue states and give them to their red states. Republicans too often demonize blue areas and cities that are the very areas that are keeping the economy going. The attacks we've heard on mayors today are not only shameful, they're dangerous capitulations to the impulses of this president who is trying to expand executive power in nearly every direction. I'd like to thank our mayors, Wu, Johnson, and Johnston for coming in today, having the strength of courage to stand up to this administration. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mayor Adams, you've agreed today. Sorry, over here. You've agreed today that New York City is a sanctuary city. Is that right?
Based on the definitions, and there doesn't seem, Congressman, there's now a uniform definition of that. But yes,
right. But that's what you've proclaimed, Mayor Johnston. You've previously also declared that you're a sanctuary city. Mayor Johnson, you said that Chicago must lead with and live by the promise to be a sanctuary city. Mayor Wu, you said Boston police and other departments cannot cooperate with ICE when it comes to detaining on civil warrants. Of course, I don't know what Mayor Johnston would define it, but I do know that the Honorable Mayor Johnson from Chicago, they call theirs a welcoming city ordinance, and we've got Ms. Wu, Mayor Wu, who's referred to hers as a safe city. That's really interesting to me. So when you are a sanctuary city, you put limits on how much you're willing to cooperate with federal agencies' efforts to remove illegal aliens. And your policies are then contravene federal law. You just do. Under Title VIII of the U.S. Code, it says a federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration Naturalization Service any information regarding the citizenship or immigration status of any individual. Yeah, so when I look at your guys' ordinances, and I got them all up here, and there's the really interesting stuff, and Denver, I think you testified previously that you rely on the statutory section, am I right, of the state statute. So let's just review this. There is a distinction, and some of you have made that. Mayor Johnson of Chicago made this repeatedly, and Mayor Wu of Boston did. There's a distinction between criminal warrant, and you say we cooperate on criminal warrant, but there's 2 levels of cooperation at least. There's a communication level, and there's a passing the person off. That's one level with the criminal. But the civil level, this is what I want to talk about for a second, because all of these ordinances proscribe communication and transfer of someone where there's a civil warrant. Now, I know that all of you understand that a removal order is a civil order. And that means none of you and none of your agencies within your municipalities are communicating or passing over someone where there's a ICE removal detainer. So I don't care how many times, 1,226 or whatever it was in 7 years, I don't care how many times you do it, but if you're not doing it for civil orders, then you're allowing people who have a removal order, who've had due process, because that's how you get a removal order. You're allowing them to stay in the country. You're in violation of this law right here. You are. You're in violation of that law right there. And you've got to start realizing what your criminal culpability is on that. And that's really what we're talking about here. So you don't think that's harboring, perhaps? But let's take a look at that next statute, please. That next federal statute. In conducting investigations and hearings, immigration officers and administrative law judges shall have reasonable access to examine evidence of any person or entity being investigated. If you're holding someone back, even if it's under a civil warrant, because that's what you said you're not going to participate in, and you are preventing access to that person or evidence, you're in violation of this. You have criminal culpability under this. And you'll notice there's no mens rea requirement here. This is it. Every one of you is exposed to criminal culpability here. That's the reality of it. Let's do the next one. Any person who knowing that a person is an alien, knowing or in reckless disregard, now you got a culpable mental state here, of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection, such alien in any place. You'll notice it doesn't make a distinction that all of y'all want to make of criminal warrants versus civil. You're all in violation of all three of these statutes. You got criminal culpability. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall from Washington State.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for taking the time to be here today. I represent the northwest corner of the country, though I did happily live in Boston for 10 years safely. And Washington State is proudly home to more than 1 million immigrants. We know in Washington that our communities, like yours, are stronger because of immigrants. We are fed because of immigrants. We're able to take public transportation because of the work of immigrants. We are able to work on building the affordable housing that we need because of immigrants. We receive quality health care because of immigrants. But this administration, as we see over and over and over, is more concerned with deporting families than supporting families. Their actions are rooted in hatred and fear and deliberate misunderstanding. They say they want to lower costs, but what their actions show us is the opposite. Immigrants drive our economy. And this administration's mass deportations have disrupted small businesses, wreaked havoc on our communities, all while families see their grocery bills continue to rise and worry about their health care being ripped away. My constituents are scared. They're writing to us that they're afraid to go out in public, send their kids to school, go to the grocery store without 2 other members of their family or their neighbors with them. There are dozens of families making emergency plans to make sure someone is legally designated to take care of their children if they're detained or deported. And in fact, our governor had to create additional policy to ensure that kids are not left alone when their parents disappear. We've heard from beet farmers and wheat growers and florists, Christmas tree farms, grocers, and salal harvesters that their businesses cannot continue without the support of immigrants. We know that there is a huge economic impact to our families and our communities. And Mayor Adams, per your testimony in 2021, on immigrant New Yorkers, you stated that including those who are undocumented, immigrants in New York paid billions of dollars in taxes and contributed billions more in spending power to the New York economy. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So one can imagine if this administration continues its mass deportation plans in cities across the country, including New York, it would have a significant impact on all our economies. Mr. Breyer, can you speak to what the economic impacts of mass deportation would mean for the U.S. economy?
Absolutely, it'd be devastating. You're looking at an instant recession if it was, some magic wand you could wave to get rid of all these people like they want. That'd be about a 7% drop in GDP. That's well into the trillions of dollars in lost production of goods and services that benefit Americans. And when you really think about it, when it comes to the cities, right, it's not equally distributed across the country. It's really these cities and some others that are going to be overwhelmingly impacted. So those neighborhoods, you're looking at a death spiral of economic activity when you remove so much of the population. And yet, of course, we talk about just the people who are undocumented, but their children, their spouses, all those people are going to be affected by mass deportation.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, with unanimous consent, I'd like to enter this New York Times article, Frustration Grows Inside the White House Over Pace of Deportations.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so much. And, this committee has been very interested in uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'd like to draw our attention to the ASMR deportation flight that the administration touted on their official social media channels. While previous flights, deportation flights, cost for about 10.5 hours, $47,000. This military flight that was commandeered from its mission of national security to take folks who were in detention centers already to a stopover in Guantanamo cost us $299,250 for the same flight. My folks in my community who are stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord are being diverted from their essential missions to go to Guantanamo to be layover stewardesses for this this plan that's just for clicks. It's just to continue to stir up media. It's just to deliver on a promise that the president made and that he's worried that he will be accused of letting his base down if he doesn't carry out. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the mayors here today are actively working to harm the American people you represent. You all have blood on your hands. I'm going to ask a series of yes or no questions today, and I would like to remind all of you, you are under oath. I only want a yes or a no to my questions. My first question, do you acknowledge breaking into our country as a crime? Mayor Adams, yes or no? Do you acknowledge breaking into our country as a crime?
I acknowledge.
Yes or no?
I acknowledge.
Okay, Honorable Johnson, he's not going to answer the question. Yes or no? Is breaking into our country against the law? Yes or no?
Depends how you cross the border.
Okay,
Some folks
Mayor
have
Johnson,
status.
yes or no?
Comprehensive immigration
that's not an
reform
answer.
policies
Mayor
are what's
Wu?
necessary in
Mayor
this
Wu,
moment.
do you have a better answer than these gentlemen before you? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, do you believe it's acceptable for illegals who commit heinous crimes be released back into the public instead of being detained and deported? Mayor Adams, yes or no?
Anyone break a crime?
Yes or no? This is not hard. Yes or no?
Anyone that break a crime should be detained.
Okay, Mayor, yes or no?
They should be deported.
Okay, Mayor.
Any individual that
Yes or no?
causes harm
Yes or
and
no?
breaks
Okay,
the law
Mayor Wu?
should be held accountable.
This is why you have 6% approval rating, because you suck at answering questions. Mayor Wu? Yes or no?
Anyone who's a public safety threat should be prosecuted.
All right, I have my next question. When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history? Mayor Adams, yes or no?
Can we say that question again?
Okay, Mayor Johnston. When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history? Yes or no?
I will charge and prosecute them.
Yes or no? Okay, well, okay. You said you would go to jail, didn't you?
I will
For
charge
harboring
and
illegal
prosecute
aliens or
anyone.
something, Mayor Johnson?
Could you repeat your question, please?
When an illegal alien rapes a woman, do you believe you're on the right side of history?
Could you clarify that question?
Okay, Mayor Wu, yes or no?
No, rape is obviously
Then
horrible.
why are you letting rapists back out onto the streets of Boston?
That is not true. That is
Okay.
not what's happening in
when
Boston.
an illegal alien molests a kid, molests an underage kid, do you pat yourself on the back for being compassionate? Mayor Adams?
It's despicable, and he should be arrested.
Mayor Johnston?
I prosecute folks that commit crimes like that.
You guys let him out on the streets. Mayor Johnson?
We arrest violent criminals in the city of Chicago.
Mayor Wu?
We investigate, arrest, and prosecute.
You guys don't sound very confident today. Would your city honor an ICE detainer on an illegal alien who rapes kids if one was issued today? Mayor Adams? Yes or no?
In conformance with law, we will honor detainers.
Mayor Johnson?
If there's a criminal warrant, we'll help them pick them up. If there's no criminal warrant, we'll honor a notification request.
Mayor Johnson?
Criminal warrants, we always cooperate with federal agents with a criminal warrant.
Mayor Wu?
Get a criminal warrant, we will enforce.
A criminal warrant. I'm talking about an ICE detainer on an individual who's here illegal who rapes kids. Do you all hate Donald Trump more than you love your country? Mayor Adams?
I respect my president. I respect my
Yes or
country,
no?
and I
You're having the
respect
hardest time
my
today.
Senate.
Mayor Johnston?
I love my country.
Yes or no?
I love my country.
Okay. Mayor Johnson?
As the son of a pastor, I love everyone and this country.
Mayor Wu?
I love my country and my city.
Do you all, are you all willing to go to jail for violating federal law? Mayor Adams?
I'm not going to violate federal law, so I don't have to worry about that.
Mayor Johnston?
We don't violate federal law either.
You don't violate federal law.
We do not violate federal law.
Is it violating federal law if you don't honor detainer requests from ICE?
Absolutely not. In fact, the statute Congressman Biggs shared, we explicitly follow. The statute says you cannot prohibit city employees from sharing information about someone's status with the government. We do not prohibit that.
Do you love illegal aliens more than you love your fellow countrymen?
I love all the residents of the city and county.
Mayor Johnston, are you willing to go to jail for violating federal law?
The city of Chicago complies with all laws.
Oh, I highly doubt that. Mayor Wu?
We are not violating federal law.
Mayor Wu, I have a last couple questions for you. Do you believe that ICE arresting a child rapist, quote, threatens everyone's safety, end quote? Yes or no?
No.
Does ICE arresting a murderous MS-13 gang member threaten everyone's safety? Yes or no?
No.
I would like to hold up this quote of you where you say ICE's efforts actually threaten the safety of everyone, end quote, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. You're a hypocrite. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent
Subramaniam.
request. Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous consent request.
Proceed.
I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record this article, and I'll do this as a survivor of sexual violence myself. This is from Courts, March 2018.
Without objection, so ordered.
Data from Texas shows that U.S.-born...
Without objection, so ordered. We've put it in the record.
I haven't entered it.
You have what?
Mr. Chair, can I have several articles. So I need to enter them. Let me just go ahead with what the articles are, what they speak to.
What's the next article?
Let me proceed. Data from Texas shows that U.S.-born Americans commit more rape and murder than immigrants.
Listen, this trend of you all trying to get thrown out of committee so you can get on MSNBC is going to end. We're not going to put up with it.
This is my procedural right as a member of this committee
you can
to
go,
enter documents
you can go with
into the
Mr.
record.
Frost and Mr. Green.
I am reclaiming my time.
That's what
do
you
not
want.
get to
No.
dictate
Ms. Presley,
how
I've been
I
very,
recite the
I have
articles
been very
for the
accommodating
record.
to you. Mr. Subramaniam,
And I take particular umbrage as a survivor of sexual violence. I will enter into the record. This is my right. Thank you.
No. It is Mr. Subramaniam.
Mr. Chair.
No, you know the process of unanimous consent. You are not
I
recognized.
have several articles to enter into the record.
Mr. Subramaniam, if you don't go, we're going to recognize Mr. Timmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring up a bill that's going to be before the floor, H.R. 32, a bill that would basically take away federal grants if the administration thinks you are a, quote, sanctuary city, which, by the way, isn't even very well defined. I'm not even sure from reading the bill whether your cities are even sanctuary cities to begin with. I think that's why that question may have been difficult for you to answer. Well, I think what's been very interesting to hear is how well you've been able to integrate and welcome immigrants into your communities, into your city's economies, and making the best out of a difficult situation. I find that very impressive. And but I wonder to the mayors here, Mr. Johnston, if you took away federal grants, how would that affect public safety of your city? Would that improve? Would that make your city more safe or less safe if we took away federal grants from your city?
It would dramatically weaken public safety. I mean, we wouldn't be able to repair bridges that are falling apart. It means we wouldn't be able to put kids in preschool or give veterans medical care. It would be catastrophic.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, the same question. Mayor Johnson, the same question.
It would certainly undermine all of the investments that we've made thus far. Since I've been mayor, we've provided $20 billion of new investments that contribute to the overall safety of the city of Chicago.
Mayor Wu, same question. Would this make your city of Boston more safe or less safe?
Withdrawing federal funds would make us less safe. Education makes us more safe. Housing makes us more safe, and we rely on those funds.
And how did, let's take Mayor Johnson, how did many of the immigrants come to your city? You mentioned they came from Texas, is that right?
That's correct, Congressman. They came on buses sent from Texas, mostly from El Paso.
I feel like we have the wrong people in the room today. We have mayors of cities that are trying to do their best with the situation that they have. And then we have governors in Texas and Florida who are busing folks up to your cities. And so you're trying to make the best out of this situation. But somehow they're trying to make our immigration system worse, in essence, because they're taking the folks that come over to their states and they're spreading them across the country, and you're just trying to deal with that situation. Would you characterize it as that, Mayor Johnson?
Yes, sir. We're just trying to manage the crisis in front of us, which is families being dropped off on our city streets in the winter with no clothes. Our calling is to make sure they're safe.
And how would the Trump administration's funding freezes and cuts, would they undermine public safety in your city, Mayor Johnson?
They could dramatically undermine public safety in our city. Everything again.
Mayor Johnson, same question.
It certainly will undermine community safety if the
Mayor
federal government undermines the investments in people of Chicago.
It would undermine our safety too.
So we're trying to make your cities more safe, but there's a bill here in the name of making your cities more safe actually makes your cities less safe. Would you agree with that, Mayor Johnson?
Yes, sir, I would.
Mayor Johnson, same question. Mayor Wu,
yes.
Same question. And I think this bill is actually, in a way, extortion, because you're basically trying to take away funding from a city if they don't do what the administration wants you to do. But let's talk about extortion for a minute. Mayor Adams, I think everyone's a little bit concerned about the timeline of events that has led to your case being dropped. And so, Mayor Adams, did you meet with Tom Homan on December 12th of last year?
Oh, yes, I did.
Did President Trump say publicly that he considered pardoning you 4 days after that meeting? Yes or no?
I don't recall what the president said in regards to that meeting.
Well, he did. In January, did you meet with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago? Yes or no?
Yes, I did.
In this meeting, did you talk about immigration enforcement with the president?
Talk about immigration in general.
What was that? What did you talk about when it comes to immigration?
Just how important it is to secure the border, and they were able to do so. We saw a 90% decrease, and I see that on my streets every day.
Did you talk about your pending case with the DOJ?
No, I did not.
So the case did not come out. Have you ever talked about your case with the DOJ with the president?
No more than what you heard him on the trail say that he thought it was important.
I haven't heard much. Tell me, have you ever talked about the president, talked about your case in the DOJ with the president?
Yeah, as I indicated previously, I'm going to say it again. This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to him.
Have you ever talked about your case with anyone in the Trump administration?
I'm going to say this again. This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to Judge Ho, he is going to determine the outcome of this case.
That's not answering the question. I'm going to ask you one more time. Have you ever talked about this case with anyone in the Trump administration?
This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to Judge Ho is going to decide the outcome of this case.
I think Mayor Adams is not answering the question because he probably has. And I think there's a pretty clear timeline here that indicates that a case is being dropped in the name of trying to appease the president, who seems to be okay with what's going on. And so look, we can talk about the policy, but I think there's a bigger problem here of public extortion and almost an endorsement of this extortion. And it's becoming the norm for this administration. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, before you do, I have a unanimous consent request, please.
Ms. Spansbury, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 4 articles I would like to enter into the record titled "The Mythical Tie Between Immigration and Crime. Undocumented immigrants half as likely to be arrested for violent crimes. Immigrants significantly less likely to commit crimes," and one titled "Showing Data About U.S.-Born Citizens More Likely to Commit Murder." And Mr. Chairman, I do ask that you do respect my colleagues on this side of the aisle, parliamentary.
Without objection, so ordered. Your unanimous consents are put into the record, and only titles are required. And once you start filibustering, you become out of order.
I am not filibustering.
I'm just saying the last member on your side was filibustering.
She was not. She had.
Yes, she was.
And now you're filibustering.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak directly to all 4 of the mayors. Y'all did the best you could with bad situations. You did. The former president let in, I don't even know what number to use. Some places use 8 million, some people use 16, 20, whatever the number is. And so each of you had an influx of illegal immigrants into your cities, and you have federal, state, and local statutes that you have to deal with, and an untenable situation was created. I want to go one by one. Mayor Adams, how many illegal immigrants were present in New York City in the last 4 years? How many people did you have to deal with?
230,000.
All right, so, and that's 230,000 people that were using your limited resources that American citizens are entitled to, but you were actually required under local ordinance or under state law to provide services to them. They're not supposed to be here. They're not supposed to be here because we have borders. Borders are supposed to matter. Mayor Johnston, how many illegal immigrants did you have to deal with over the last 4 years?
Thank you, sir. We had 42,000 newcomers arrive over.
42,000. Mayor Johnson, how many illegal immigrants did you have to deal with over the last 4 years?
Over the last 4 years, there were roughly 50,000 asylum seekers bused from the state of Texas to the city of Chicago.
And you know why that Texas did that? Because 10, 12, 15 million people were in Texas, and they had to deal with the same problem you did, and they thought it was appropriate that everyone should have to share this burden. Mayor Wu, how many did Boston have over the last 4 years?
We don't ask about immigration status and giving services, so I don't have that number.
Okay, well, we'll say at least tens of thousands. So all of you have limited resources, limited tax dollars to spend to serve your community. And there's people that have a disproportionate need, and you have obligations to serve them more if they are struggling, if they do not have income, if they are jobless. So you have limited resources, and all of you had this problem. And we've been saying for the last 4 years that this is all because Joe Biden and his policies were allowing lawlessness at our southern border, which allowed millions of people into this country. Mayor Johnston, did you say anything to the Biden administration? Did you say, we're struggling, we can't make ends meet, we can't serve our citizens because of your open southern border? Did you, Mayor Johnston?
Yes, Congressman, I did reach out to the Biden administration about that.
Did you publicly address this? Did you ever challenge them and say, this is ridiculous, secure the southern border?
What we focused on, sir, was the biggest challenge we were facing was folks needed the right to work.
I couldn't find anything where you told the Biden administration they are wrong for their border policy. Mayor Johnson, did you publicly attack the President Biden in the last 4 years because he let millions of people into this country and it hurt your constituents? Did you publicly attack him for his policies?
So I publicly called
Did you say secure the damn border? No, you didn't.
I publicly called for Congress to pass comprehensive immigration
Okay, we'll get to that in a second.
And that
Mayor
did
Wu,
not happen.
Did you ever publicly attack the open border policies of the previous administration?
Congressman, in fact, we hosted the former Secretary of DHS in Boston so that he could see the impact.
To talk about how we need legislation, I'm sure. Mayor Adams. Did you ever publicly attack President Biden for his open border policy?
Yes, in addition to having $7 billion out of our tax base.
Did you see what his administration did to political opponents? Did you see what they did to President Trump? I guess you're standing up for your people. I admire that. For the last 4 years, I heard how Congress needed to spend tens of billions of dollars to secure the southern border. We had to change policies. We had to do all this nonsense. We didn't need to do any of that. We just needed a new president. Last month, we had the lowest number of border crossings in decades. And I can promise you this, that's going to continue because our president has always had the ability to stop this. And the only one of you that stood up to the previous administration was under investigation shortly thereafter. Weird how that happens. We're turning the page here. Going forward, each of you need to cooperate to the fullest extent of your ability with President Trump, with ICE, with all federal laws to make sure that you can secure your people and stop spending billions of taxpayer dollars on people that do not deserve it. Your constituents deserve those resources, not the people that enter this country illegally. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Ansari from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. President Trump has talked a big game about how he wants to allegedly make our cities and communities safer. He says he wants to get violent criminals off the streets, and he thinks that mass deportations are the way to do it. He sent ICE and Border Patrol agents after our Native American communities, parents and children, and law-abiding American citizens who are targeted simply because of the color of their skin or the language that they're speaking. The chaos and the fear that this has instilled pits neighbor against neighbor, creates more distrust in law enforcement, and puts us all in danger. Mayor Wu, first of all, congratulations on your baby. What have you been hearing from communities in Boston? Are people fearful of engaging with law enforcement?
In Boston, because our laws are what they are, we have very strong relationships with our community, and that's why we've been able to continue making progress on being the safest major city in the nation. But we do hear that people are afraid of the federal government, and it's including people who are immigrants, but also U.S. citizens. That fear is widespread.
Thank you. Perhaps most disturbing, President Trump has diverted critical Homeland Security investigation agents to work on immigration enforcement. That means they're no longer investigating violent crimes like human trafficking, child pornography, and the flow of fentanyl in our communities, putting our entire country at greater risk. That means fewer violent criminals, pedophiles, and drug runners being apprehended, not more. Once again, Republicans are making life easier for criminals at the expense of victims, actually making our communities less safe. Mr. Beer, question for you. What effect do you think that assigning DHS agents to deportations is going to have on public safety?
Well, it's an extremely negative effect, and it's not just limited to DHS. He's pulling in FBI, ATF, DEA. They're all being diverted off their primary missions to crack down on criminal gangs and criminal organizations in the United States. So it's not just DHS, it's every criminal agency in the United States government is being diverted to mass deportation right now.
The Phoenix police chief has stated, we work with our federal partners all the time to work on criminal issues, not civil immigration issues. That will continue to be the stance of the Phoenix Police Department. I can tell you during my time on the Phoenix City Council, I served on the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee. I heard constantly from our police force that they are understaffed and need to focus their resources on violent crime. But President Trump has also tried to force municipalities to divert their law enforcement personnel to aid in mass deportations. Diverting city police to deportations would mean that our officers are spending less time investigating murders, rapes, and robberies. Now, I want to shift to the economy. Mayor Wu, would you agree that local leaders and public safety officials who hear directly from constituents about public safety know better what your city needs to focus on than the White House does? And also, are you worried about ICE raids and the impact that it will have for businesses and economic prosperity?
Yes, our local community knows best, and we can tell you in Boston, over our history, it has not been the word of presidents or kings or presidents who think they are kings that set what happens. It is our residents.
And Mr. Beer, can you tell us more on what the economic impacts like food prices and housing costs of mass deportations would be and how this could affect a city like Phoenix?
Well, about half the cost of the fruits and vegetables on your in your grocery store is coming from the labor of immigrants and other workers at our farms. So it's an extremely important component of our agricultural production in the United States. If you look at where these people have gone, they have gone into the sectors where there is no work visa. There is no legal immigration option for employers to hire in these sectors. That is why we had so many people come, because of the labor needs of the United States.
Thank you so much. I truly want to thank the mayors for being here and taking on these ridiculous attacks on our local officials. You know what is best for your communities and the people that you represent. You know better than Donald Trump. You know better than Tom Homan. You know better than Stephen Miller. So thank you so much. And finally, I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record, first, a report published by the American Immigration Council titled Mass Deportation, Devastating Cost to America, Its Budget, and the Economy. And second, a Center for American Progress report titled Trump's Rash Immigration Actions Place Cruelty and Spectacle Above Security.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I yield back to the ranking member.
Chair recognizes Mr. Donalds from Florida.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my third term on the Oversight Committee. We've been talking about illegal immigration and oversight the entire time. I remember we had a group of this committee that went down to the El Paso section of the border. This was back in February, March of 2021. And during that time period, we were at one of the holding centers, and there were these buses that were coming to the detention facility, and they were picking up 30 kids, 50 kids at random, walking out of the facility. And when I went over to question the bus driver that was transporting these kids, border agents told me, as a member of Congress, that you're not allowed to question the bus driver. And of course, people knowing me, I didn't take no for an answer, and I repeated the question. And I was told that this bus of children was leaving El Paso and going to San Diego. And so what was occurring under the Biden administration is that they were busing unaccompanied minors all across the United States for one reason and one reason only. And that was because they did not want the press to see the pictures of kids in cages. They did not want to see our borders being overrun. They wanted to disperse that problem all through the United States. That is the reckless history of illegal immigration under Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. Mayor Johnston of Denver, you lamented earlier that there were 10 to 11 buses coming per day to your city. Did you ever talk to Joe Biden about why this was happening to your community?
Thank you, Congressman. I both reached out to Governor Abbott from Texas. He didn't respond, and I did.
Why would you reach out to Governor Abbott of Texas when it is Joe Biden, the former commander-in-chief, that opened up our borders? Why didn't you talk to him?
Well, our buses directly were being sent from Governor Abbott in Texas, so that was why we reached out to say we're happy to collaborate on a coordinated entry system. We understand no one state or no one city should bear the entire brunt of this, but let's collaborate. But I did.
So I'm glad you said that, because that brings me to my next point. Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis, when they started moving illegal aliens out of their states who were bearing the brunt of what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were doing, and they've sent them to Denver, they sent them to Chicago, they sent them to New York, they sent them to Martha's Vineyard. The reason why they did that is because you four could hide behind the realities of illegal immigration on border towns all through our country and on cities and states who did not want to see illegal immigration, but did not have the political representation to go to the White House. And only when it showed up on your doorstep did you get upset. Mayor Johnston, coming back to you, how much did your city spend on illegal immigration? Do you have a round number?
Over the last couple of years on all newcomers, whatever their status was, it's around $79 million since 2022.
$79 million. Mayor Johnson, Chicago. How much has the city of Chicago spent on illegal immigration?
If you're referring to the 2022 up to 2024 of the buses coming from Texas, roughly the same percentage of the state of Texas, about 1% of our overall budget.
What is that? Because I don't have the city's budget in front of me. Numbers.
It's 1%, and if you want the actual calculation, we can make sure someone.
You're the mayor. You don't have the math in front of you.
It's 1% of the overall budget over the last 4 years.
That's why you're a failing
which
mayor.
is the
Mayor
same
Adams,
number that
how
was
much did
sent
the city
from
of
us
New
from
York
the
actually
state
spend
of
on
Texas.
illegal immigration? Mayor Johnson, I already asked you. You don't have a hard number, and if you don't have a hard number, you're not running your city well. Mayor Adams, how much did the city of New York actually spend on illegal immigration?
$6.9 billion of taxpayers' dollars.
$6.9 billion of taxpayer money on a problem that was fostered on the American people. Mayor Wu, in the city of Boston, how much did you spend?
We don't ask about immigration status and delivering city
You don't
services,
ask
so
about
we
how
don't
much
have
money
that
the city
number.
of Boston has spent on illegal immigration?
We
Are you
don't
out of your
distinguish
mind?
between immigration status.
Do you
as
manage
part
your
of our
budget
city
or not,
policies.
Mayor Wu?
That is how we keep our
Mayor
city
Wu,
safe.
do you manage
we
your
have
budget
the
or not?
numbers to prove it. I manage my budget. I have a AAA bond rating dating back 10 years.
So to the city of Boston,
budget.
just understand that your mayor does not care how much of your resources she has spent on people who are not citizens
The city of Boston
the city of
is
Boston.
sick of having
I'm reclaiming
people
my
outside
time.
Boston
Mr.
telling
Bear,
us what
Mr.
we
Bear, I have
need.
a question for you because I understand Cato's perspective when it comes to illegal immigration. I understand that the Cato Institute for a long time has had a standard of actually having open immigration into the United States. Generally speaking, I don't want to get into specifics.
We support legal immigration. We want immigration to be legal.
So let me ask you this question, because one of the great libertarians of the modern era, Milton Friedman, famously said, you can either have open borders or a welfare state, but you have to choose. Mr. Beer, what do you choose?
Milton Friedman said he wanted to allow illegal immigration to continue. I disagree with Milton Friedman's position on that. We should have legal immigration and build a wall around the welfare state, not around the country. That's in the best interest of taxpayers.
And I would argue that under the current system where you have sanctuary cities popping up, it is not possible to build that wall. So America has to choose. Mr. Beer, you're done. America has to choose between securing our nation or protecting the taxpayer. I choose secure the nation. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Bell from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the 80s, there was the war on drugs. That didn't go so well. We essentially created classes of criminals for people, citizens, who just needed help. And I won't recount that entire history, but I don't think that we realized the error of our ways until it impacted more affluent communities, particularly with the opioid epidemic. And so now Republicans have began a new campaign, a war on immigrants. And while Republicans and Democrats both recognize the need to strengthen our borders, instead of sitting down and actually fixing the border situation, as has been alluded to, or actually we did that, but then after supporting it, Republicans voted against it after their boss told them not to, which really would have been a win for the American people. So as a former prosecutor, I recognize policing and community relationships go hand in hand. You have to have them in order to be effective with law enforcement. And to get bad people off the streets who are not going to commit a crime in front of a police officer, oftentimes it's our people in our communities who can help get those people off the street by sharing and cooperating with law enforcement, but that starts with trust. And understanding, as a former prosecutor, limited resources. We have to be considerate of how we utilize those resources. And so my first question, Mr. Byron, I'm going to go quick because I want to try to get to y'all. Why will requiring a local police department to honor extrajudicial ICE detainers or risk losing federal funding make our cities less safe?
Well, you're taking resources away from whatever the higher priority is. So if you're talking about carrying out mass deportation and having state and local police detain people who are not public safety threats, then you're talking about in New York City, they're spending $1,500 a day on a bed. So that's $1,500 taken away from other public safety priorities.
And Mayor Wu, and congratulations again as well.
Thank you.
And first, you're welcome for St. Louis born and bred Jason Tatum. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why is it in Boston's best interest to make sure people who are experiencing domestic violence or are victims of violent crime feel comfortable coming forward to law enforcement with the knowledge that local police are not reporting them to ICE?
We need those who have information. We need those who are victims and survivors of crime to know that they can come forward and get the help that they need. And when that happens, we keep everyone safer.
Absolutely. And many law enforcement agencies have articulated that their primary responsibility is to keep communities safe by focusing on violent crime and public safety threats. However, deputizing requires officers to take on federal immigration duties, diverting resources and personnel from their core mission. So when cities use their discretion, and Mr. Byer, this is a quick question for you, do you believe that this additional burden makes communities safer, or does it risk overextending local departments at the expense of addressing serious crimes?
I think states are best positioned to answer that question. It certainly can if you're imposing a mandate that is distracting from their public safety mission. And it's interesting to note that the majority's bill on this, H.R. 32, has an exception written in there for witnesses and victims of crimes. If you don't report them, it's okay under that bill, except no one's walking around with a victim or witness badge on them. So when a police shows up and responds to a call, they don't know who's a witness or victim. So the idea that you can just cordon that off and put that to the side doesn't hold up.
I appreciate that. I'm just short on time. And Mayor Johnson, I have two quick questions for you, and you can give them the weight that you decide to give them. First, who has more world championships, the Cardinals or the Cubs? Mayor Adams, I don't want you in on that one. Can you tell us about the ways in which Chicago cooperates with federal law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Violent crime in the city of Chicago is down. It continues to go down in my leadership because of our investments. Having trust between community and police, local police, is attributed to that. And our local police department allies and cooperates with federal agents around human trafficking, drug trafficking, getting guns off the street, getting gangs off the streets of the city of Chicago, and it has worked. And the first black first lady in the history of Chicago is a Cardinals fan. Shout out to Hazelwood East.
Hey, that's my school. Thank you. I yield back to the ranking member.
And it's the Yankees.
No questions for you, Mr. Adams.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Luna from Florida.
Mayor Wu, does the Boston Trust Act restrict communication with federal immigration authorities regarding individuals' immigration status, yes or no?
We do not collect immigration status in law enforcement.
I'd just like to point out, and Mr. Chairman, if I could enter the Boston Trust Act into the record. Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. On section 4AA, a law enforcement official and employment of the city department, agency, or commission shall not, and then A, inquire of an individual on his or her immigration status. Under Title 8, U.S. Code subsection 1373 stipulates that local governments cannot prohibit or restrict communication with federal immigration authorities regarding individuals' immigration status, so your enforcement of this act is in direct violation of that statute. Can you please confirm?
That is not
Thank
the
you,
truth.
ma'am. That's a U.S. code. I don't know about you, but U.S. code does not lie.
We do not ask about
Mayor
immigration
Johnson, I'm not
status, and that is
talking
what
to you anymore.
makes us
Next
safe in the
question,
city.
Mayor Johnston, you said in your testimony that the first step you took after illegal aliens arrived was to provide them with housing. Is that correct, yes or no?
Folks that were on the streets freezing to death, we gave access to shelter. Yes, we did.
Thank you. Not to be rude here, but you have a good understanding of what the definition of harboring is, correct?
I do.
Okay. For those that might not, harboring means to knowingly or recklessly provide shelter or place to stay for an illegal alien. And according to Title 8 of U.S. Code subsection 1324, that is also a federal crime. Just to be clear, did you also say that you would be willing to go to jail to stop deportation efforts?
I did say that I'd be willing to stand up for all of our residents, and the context was that was the point at which the administration was threatening to deploy the U.S. military to streets of our cities to pull kids out of schools and churches,
Thank
so we
you.
were worried about that.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record an article from CBS.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. In this, it says, Johnson said earlier this week that he's willing to use civil disobedience and, if necessary, going to jail to stop deportations. My final question would be for you, Mr. Mayor Johnson. Do you believe that Chicago's welcoming city ordinance encourages illegal aliens to enter the United States, specifically into Chicago? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So you don't believe that banning the transfer of individuals into ICE custody for the purpose of civil immigration enforcement encourages illegal immigration into Chicago? Or how about agencies, sorry, one second, or agents not being able to stop, arrest, or detain individuals based solely on their immigration status or administrative warrant?
So we comply with all laws, local, state, and federal.
To me, after this line of questioning, it's very clear that these policies that you have all implicated are active and alive and well in your cities, are in direct violation with U.S. Title 8 Code subsection 1324, and is a federal offense. But you all speak about a broken immigration system, and yet here you guys are aiding and abetting in that entire process. I want to be very clear about something. Open border policies, which is something that you guys are talking about, hurts people on both sides, meaning the people that are coming here illegally and then American citizens as well. I do not think you guys are bad people, but I think that you are ideologically misled, which is why, unfortunately, based on your responses, I'm all going to be criminally referring you to the Department of Justice for investigation. And as soon as I leave here, these will be going over to Pam Bondi. I'm not doing that in an effort to bully you guys, but I do believe that your policies are hurting the American people, and you can make that known with the evidence that you can present to the Department of Justice. But if you guys continue doing what you're doing, you're not going to help anyone. You're going to hurt more people, and that's exactly why I'm tired of it. The American people are tired of it. And Chairman, I yield my time.
Would you yield your last minute?
Yes, sir.
Mayor Adams, you were one of the first mayors in what the media refers to as a blue city, typically, that came out and raised concerns about the influx of illegals pouring into the city of New York. Could you answer the question, what that did to New York City from a budgetary standpoint? Let's not even talk about crime or anything. Let's just talk about from a budgetary, the burden on the citizens of New York City.
As I indicated, Mr. Chairman, we spent $6.9 billion, and the long-term impact of that is extremely significant. After COVID, we had a large number of children who was chronically absent. We could have taken $200 million of that and dealt with that. We have a real mental health crisis in our city. We could have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that. And so the long-term impact of spending $6.9 billion is going to have serious ramification on the future of New York City. So it's more than just what happened last year or this year. It is what is going to impact us long term.
And I think that's one of the purposes of this hearing, to talk about the consequences from cities that have huge illegal alien populations. So Chair now recognizes Ms. Presley from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Wu, I am grateful for our long-standing partnership in public service. I'm grateful to be your congresswoman as well as your constituent. Can I get that time back? All right. Again, grateful for our longstanding partnership in public service, grateful to be your congresswoman, and grateful to be your constituent. It's clear my colleagues across the aisle didn't do their homework, because the fears and division they're trying to project onto Boston are really the stuff of Fox News fever dreams. Our city is vibrant, our city is diverse, our city is beautiful. Mayor Wu, immigration is central to the economic success of Boston, is it not?
Absolutely. All of our key industries, whether it's healthcare, life sciences, higher education, financial services, everything that we do depends on immigrant residents and the contributions that they make.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, immigration defines Boston. For generations, our city has been shaped by people who have endured incredible hardships to arrive at our shores seeking a better life. They drove taxis, opened restaurants, studied at our schools, built homes, repaired our roads and bridges, cared for patients, cleaned offices, built businesses, provided essential early education and childcare for our babies. There is no doubt immigration is essential to the success of Boston, but there is, in fact, a dark threat looming over this great city. That threat is the racist and xenophobic anti-immigrant policies coming from this Trump White House. Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this Boston Globe article titled, "They're Going to Deport Us. Trump's Immigration Policies Prompt Some Children to Skip School."
Without objection, so ordered.
Mayor Wu, I've been speaking to principals and educators in Boston at various roundtables and town halls that I've convened, and the stories are heartbreaking. Elementary school children are crying in their teachers' arms, fearful that they're going to lose their parents to cruel and unjust deportation raids. Mayor Wu, last week I met with an esteemed doctor from a local Boston hospital who reported that follow-up appointments in her clinic have seen a 200% spike in no-shows and cancellations. Her assessment, her patients are missing critical care like dialysis, prenatal care, and chemotherapy because of a fear of immigration raids in our hospitals and healthcare settings. Mayor Wu, do you agree with this healthcare provider?
Absolutely. We hear it from our shared constituents. People are afraid, and that is having huge impact on their daily lives when they're just trying to do right and be a good example for their kids as they pursue the American dream.
Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article titled, "Fearful Amid ICE Crackdown, Some Immigrants Are Skipping Health Care."
Without objection, so ordered.
So here we have a man who thinks he is king, screaming anti-immigrant slurs from the Oval Office and what it has done to make Boston safer. Nothing, not a thing. But it has traumatized our kids, cost our elders their dialysis, delayed cancer patients' chemotherapy, and struck fear into the heart of hardworking people who not only contribute immensely to our city and our community, but whose labor and contributions are also essential to the very functions of daily life in our great city. The members of this committee would be well served by learning from our esteemed mayor, but a teach-in is not the charge of this committee. Remind my colleagues this committee's purpose is oversight. The only person who has something to answer for is Donald Trump. He is single-handedly decimating decades of economic progress, vilifying our immigrant neighbors, and disregarding the Constitution and basic decency daily. This man points to our most vulnerable, scapegoats them for every hardship, while he himself is actually the source of the hardship that the American people are experiencing. My colleagues don't really care about criminality. If you really cared about criminality, you would do something about Elon Musk's power grab, stealing our data. You would do something about efforts to defund the National Institutes of Health cancer research. If you really cared about criminality, you would do something about people that want to rob our babies of food. Make it make sense. My Republican colleagues across the aisle believe a 6-year-old from El Salvador who wants to go to school and a mom who fled violence in Haiti are the reason that the cost of eggs are too damn high. And your housing and gas will follow suit shortly because of these Donald Trump tariffs. The shameful Republican ripoff slashing away at basic government services to line the pockets of Donald Trump's buddies so they can buy toy yachts and rocket ships. It is a shame and a sham. America has a problem, and it is Donald Trump. And if my colleagues really cared about criminality, they would do something about him. I'm grateful that the people of Boston and my mayor stand with their neighbors from every walk of life. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gill from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing on such an important topic. Mayor Johnson, I want to start with you. One of your first actions as mayor was establishing a deputy mayor for immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights. I want to ask you a series of questions. If you could answer with a yes or no answer, that'd be great. First of all, do you support allowing illegal aliens to obtain driver's licenses? Just yes or no?
So the city of Chicago has been a welcoming city for over 40 years.
I'll take that as a yes. Next question.
And that's the policy that we will hold to.
Do you support tax dollars subsidizing or paying for the health care of illegal aliens?
I support investments in all residents of the people of Chicago, and that's what I do.
That's a yes as well. Do you support free or reduced college for illegal aliens?
Again, I support the investments of all residents of the people of Chicago.
Take that as a yes. Next question. Do you support allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections?
Again, I'm not over the jurisdiction of that type of law, but again, I'm committed to investing in all residents of the people of Chicago.
I'll take that as a yes. I've got an article from the Chicago Sun-Times, and I'll quote here briefly. Johnson proposed, among other things, that all residents, regardless of citizenship status, be able to vote for Chicago Board of Education members. Next question. Your website states, and this is your campaign website, quote, "I will not stop fighting until abortion access is completely secure for people all over the country," end quote. Yes or no, do you support taxpayer-funded abortions for illegal aliens?
I support the reproductive rights of all people, all women.
That is a yes as well. Your mayoral transition website mentioned support for creating a Chicago Board of Education non-citizen advisory board. Again, yes or no, do you support appointing non-citizens to government advisory boards?
I was invited here today to discuss welcoming cities.
Yes or no?
I was invited here to discuss welcoming cities.
This is a yes or no
If you're
question.
interested in asking me
You're not
questions
gonna
about the
filibuster.
welcoming
I'll
city,
take that as a
I'm happy
yes.
to answer those questions.
No, we're going to move on. As you know, President Trump, unlike the previous administration, has taken serious action to bring foreign criminal gangs to justice, to take our border back and to restore public safety in our communities. He designated 8 transnational criminal organizations and cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. These are groups like Tren de Aragua, MS-13, Sinaloa, other of some of the most grotesque and ruthless and brutal organizations in the world. You, as mayor of a sanctuary city, have been virtually giving favors to illegal aliens. Apparently, you support an enormous amount of taxpayer resources going to them as well. But you yourself have also received a lot of gifts. And for those of you who don't know, Mayor Johnson has a secret gift room that is not given access to the public or for access to the Office of Inspector General. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about that. Do you know everyone who's given you a gift since you became mayor?
The city of Chicago has had a policy for 40 years
yes or no question.
where there are individuals that would like to give gifts to
I'm
the
reclaiming
city
my
of Chicago,
time. I'm going to take that as
and we
no.
do not accept those
when
gifts.
Did you become
we
mayor?
receive them on
no, I'm
behalf
going to reclaim my
of
time
the city
here.
of Chicago.
You're not going to filibuster here. When did you become mayor?
I was elected mayor of the city of Chicago in April of 2023, and I was sworn in May 15th of 2023.
On June 12th, 2023, you received Hugo Boss cufflinks and a personalized Mont Blanc pin. Do you know who gave you those?
So I did not receive those personally. The city of Chicago
You received those
them.
on behalf
and
of
that's
the city
right,
of
on
Chicago.
behalf of the city of Chicago,
I
every
understand
mayor
the difference.
in the
Do you know
history of Chicago who has provided
gave those
gifts to the city of Chicago.
Do you know who gave those to the city of Chicago?
So again, on behalf of the city of Chicago, there
It's
are
a yes
gifts
or no
that are
question.
received,
Do
but I
you?
do not
Do you-
accept. Those are not
So you
my
don't-
personal
so you
gifts.
don't know.
Those are the gifts of the city of
on March
Chicago,
18th,
and that's why you are aware
2024,
that they exist because they're
reclaim
within
my
the law.
time here, sir. On March 18th, 2024, you received a Gucci tote bag. Do you know who gave you that? Gave the city of Chicago that?
Ken, I was here and I was invited
I'll also
to
take that as
respond
no.
to the
On March
questions
19th,
around
2024,
welcoming
the
city, and I'm
city
happy to answer
Chicago
any of those
received
questions.
A Vinci bag, a Kate Spade purse, and Carucci shoes. Do you know who gave the city of Chicago those?
Again, I was brought.
I'll take that as a no. I'm reclaiming my time
to respond
here, sir. I am
on behalf of the
reclaiming
city
my
of Chicago
time.
of what a welcoming
raises
city
serious
ordinance
ethical
is.
concerns. You are providing an enormous amount of aid to illegal aliens, aiding and abetting criminals who have come into our country illegally. And you yourself are receiving an enormous amount of gifts, and you won't even tell us who they're coming from. That
Chairman,
raises
time is up.
serious ethical
We have a
concerns.
5-minute rule.
Gentlemen's time's
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record the City of Chicago Office of Inspector General advisory concerning gifts accepted on behalf of the city.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor Adams, since we're on this conversation around oversight and some misclaims here about corruption, I mean, do you agree, Mr. Mayor Adams?
Yes, I hear you. I hear you, Congressman.
Oh, okay. You weren't looking at me. That's why. It's okay. I'll speak louder if you want. Do you agree to a quid pro quo deal to enforce the Trump administration's cruel immigration policy in exchange for protection from the federal corruption charges against you? And you are under oath, just as a reminder.
Congresswoman, there was no agreement. There was no quid pro quo, and I've done nothing wrong.
So help me out here, though. So the Trump official, Tom Homan, we all know who he is. He said, quote, I'm quoting him, "If he doesn't come through, I'll be in his office, up his butt, sorry, Chairman, saying where the hell is the agreement we came to, end of quote. You're accusing the Trump administration for lying? Did they lie? What agreement did they're lying then?
Mr. Homeland and I both agree we will fight dangerous criminals, and we've never had any conversation about my case.
Okay. So Mayor Johnson and Johnson and Wu, I'm sorry, I can't get that.
You can just call it Chicago and Denver.
There you go. This is really important, you know, as a child of immigrants, and I think many of my colleagues on that side of the aisle have beautiful, diverse communities as well. And one of the things that I know happens when we try to have local law enforcement and local city officials, I mean, they even want Treasury, folks that work for our city Treasury, asking people for immigration status. That's what they would prefer.
See if he's ready.
You know, is that racial profiling? I mean, what do you do? Like, you wait for somebody to come, they have an accent, maybe they wear hijab, maybe they look a certain way. That's what they want you to do. That's what they're asking you to do, by the way. They want you all to basically do the job of what the federal government should be doing in regards to passing really comprehensive immigration reform, so families are not separated, because right now they're just, all they want to do is continue talking about enforcement. And guess what? The last 20 years it didn't work, did it? It isn't working. So one by one, if you can talk about that, because I know my mother, who's been here for over 50 years, is carrying her passport, her U.S. passport for the first time in her life. And she ain't traveling nowhere out of the country. But she's carrying it because she knows her beautiful accent, it's beautiful, I love it, and just so fearful of being stopped and being asked her immigration status. She knows she'll be racially profiled. And she already feels unsafe in a community she lived in for over 50 years.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would just agree. We don't think it's relevant to know someone's status when they come into a public library to check out a book, or if they come to the hospital for service, or if they come to register their child for school. The Constitution says you're entitled to an education. Our job is to provide it. So we think that's unnecessary, and it just scares people away.
Yeah, Mayor.
Yeah, allowing local law enforcement in the city of Chicago to focus on city priorities, as well as making sure that there's trust between our immigrant communities and all of our communities.
I've worked on domestic violence cases as a former immigration attorney.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, this is deadly for women being abused. Deadly.
It certainly engenders trust, and that's how we have driven crime down in the city of Chicago, because of that trust.
Mayor Wu.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Boston is proud to be the safest major city in the country, and we do not ask about immigration status when providing city services. We also are clear to all our residents that we do not care about immigration status when we hold people accountable for doing harm in the community as well.
Yeah, because when I hear sanctuary city, I hear anti-racial profiling. I really do. I hear like, okay, we're not here in the business of trying to enforce broken immigration laws that are inhumane, completely immoral right now. That's what I hear. And I, as a former immigration attorney, when I hear the story in Denver, and trust me, ICE is there waiting to pick them up. They sent 6 of them, and they couldn't handle 6 of them couldn't take this guy that they're supposed to pick up. Doesn't make any sense to me, because they're there. They're pretending they don't know that as a fact. But one of the things that bothers me about all of this is the executive order of rescinding the sensitive locations. Why this is important. They basically want to do immigration enforcement and racial profiling, and immigration enforcement that's race-based, because I'm at the Canadian border in Detroit. Do you know the majority of people coming down undocumented is Canadian? But guess what? It's still the brown folks that are overwhelming. ACLU did a study, is overwhelming the ones being targeted, detained, and deported. And so for me, the sensitive location, this is hospitals, schools. You know, this is like funerals. This was all a policy in place to protect us from having our communities over police and militarized. Can you talk about the impact of that? And I have 22 more seconds because he went over 22 more seconds.
He spoke over him.
No, he didn't. No, I didn't. Chairman, I never spoke over him.
No, not you. The mayor spoke over Brandon.
Oh, well, I didn't. It doesn't matter. He went over 22 seconds.
Go ahead and ask your question.
I just want them to answer the question about the sensitive locations, because this is something we all should be scared of, because pastors are calling me because they're talking about churches possibly having ICE agents show up at churches.
I can just say, Congresswoman, our fastest growing church in Denver went from 700 folks in the parishon to 5 after that announcement.
All right. Very good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Chair recognizes Mr. Fallon from Texas.
All right, 43 seconds. That's a deal. All right. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Coming into this very important hearing, I suspected that Democrats would claim illegal immigrants pose no danger and would frame them as a sympathetic victim class completely glaze over the tremendous financial burden that mass unlawful migration places on the shoulders of the American taxpayers. And furthermore, they would completely ignore the grave dangers that violent criminal illegals pose to all Americans. It would be, Democrats would use spin and deflection and woke wonderment and delusion, and some would even blatantly lie. And as they so often do, the left did not disappoint. The first claim that we heard was they were ICE agents ripping adorable children off adorable school buses. It was a myth and it never happened. And what was the source of this Democratic claim? One letter written by one superintendent in a country of 13,000 school districts. And that letter said that this may happen. Well, I may start a business with flying monkeys delivering you fruit salads. I may. But it never happened. And the case in point, it was Alice ISD. And Mr. Chairman, there was another letter that Alice ISD sent, and I'm going to quote it. It said, "We have not had any Customs and Border Patrol enter or board buses, nor do we have any knowledge of it happening here or in any other school district." It was a spin, it was deflection, and it was a lie. Now, the most important thing that any elected official should focus on is to keep our citizens safe. There's no greater calling. Mayor Johnson, is Chicago a safe city?
We are a safer city since I've been in office. Crime
Safer
is down.
city. Okay, sir.
Crime is down
Sir, do you
over
know
20%.
that, sir, no, you're not
just
going to
this year
overtalk.
alone.
Mr. Chairman, I reclaim my time. You're not going to overtalk me. Brandon's, he was very nice, and he's a freshman. Not going to do that. In 2022, I find it interesting that you say Chicago's safe. You have a higher murder rate than Haiti. And the Biden administration put up a travel advisory saying to Americans, don't go to Haiti. I hope that the Trump administration puts up a travel advisory saying, don't go to Chicago. In fact, the Haiti has a murder rate of 18.02%. Chicago has a murder rate of 18.26%. I can see why, sir, you have a 14% approval rating. Mayor Wu, you're a Democrat, yes?
Yes,
Okay. You supported the Biden-Harris administration politically?
I did.
Yeah, okay. Do you think that they took border security seriously?
I think Washington failed on immigration and continues to do so.
So let me ask that again. Did you think the Biden administration took border security seriously?
I think Washington
It's
failed.
a yes or no. It's not a trick question, Mayor.
I think there's responsibility across this entire.
Come on, we can eke it out of you. Yes or no? Did Biden-Harris do a good job? You were supporting Kamala Harris, so apparently you must have thought she was okay on it.
Washington.
Okay,
has
so you're not
failed,
going to answer.
and
Well,
we
here's
are
the thing.
cleaning up
We can deal with
pieces
delusion.
at city.
No, Mayor, I'm going to reclaim my time. We can deal with delusion or we can deal with data. So let's talk about some data. I find this interesting. Under the 12 years that Barack Obama and Donald Trump were president, there were 460,000 illegal encounters annually on average. Under Joe Biden, it was 2,641,000. It was 600% worse. Mayor Wu, you would agree with me, I hope, on this. Vladimir Putin's a bad hombre, and he rules over an authoritarian regime, yeah?
Yes.
Bipartisan agreement. Wonderful. There were, under President Trump's first administration, 98 Russian nationals that were apprehended on the southern border entering the country illegally. Under Joe Biden, it was 127,415, 130,000% worse. Terror watch list went from 11 under President Trump to 382. That might be one of them calling right now. February of 2024, 190,000 illegal immigrants were apprehended. This past month was only 8,000, a 96% reduction. Now, the common theme that we heard from a lot of oversight Democrats is a bold-faced lie that illegal immigrants, or I should say immigrants, are less likely to commit crimes. What they're doing is they're fusing legal immigrants with illegal. When you bifurcate, when you separate them, yes, legal immigrants are less likely to commit crimes, but illegal immigrants are more likely to. Non-U.S. citizens account for 7% of the U.S. population, yet account for 15% of the federal arrests and prosecutions, according to the Justice Department. The Federation for American Immigration Reform found that if you were an illegal immigrant, you were 2 times more likely to be incarcerated in California and New York, and 5 times more likely in Arizona. And in my home state, in June of 2011 to June of 2024, January 2024, Mr. Chairman, there were 428,000 criminal aliens booked in Texas jails. 299,000 of them were illegal immigrants charged with murder, rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, assault et al. 187,000 convictions. So it is an outrageous claim to say that when we secure the border, Mr. Chairman, no, 42 seconds left.
No, you don't.
No. I got 20. Yes, I do, because she went over 42 seconds. Spare me. Mr. Chairman, I got 20 seconds left, and I'll wrap
He's wrapping his question up, but he's doing.
It's an outrageous claim to say that securing the border and enforcing our immigration laws does not make Americans safer, because it does. And if you don't agree with that, I would encourage you to talk to Laken Riley's family or Jocelyn Nerngray's family. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlemen, thank you. Chair recognizes Ms. Stansbury from New Mexico.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always think that we should sage this room after these hearings because we hear a lot of crazy stuff in here. But let me start out by saying, mayors, welcome to our committee. Thank you for serving your cities and your people. I have to say, as also an elected official, you have the hardest job in America. There is no job harder than being a mayor of a major city. So thank you for serving your constituents. And I want to take this opportunity to especially acknowledge Mayor Wu, because not only are you the first woman to ever serve the city of Boston, if you all haven't been watching, she is also the mother of a newborn who is here with her. She has a 7-week-old baby, and she showed up to testify and be yelled at by our colleagues for 4 hours. So I say to you, Mayor Wu, may your daughter grow up to be a fierce leader like you.
Thank you.
Now, I want to reject the fundamental premise of this hearing, because what this entire effort is about is intimidating state and local officials, attacking law-abiding immigrant families, and spending millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, both in the administration and in Congress, to make ads that are complete smoke and mirrors, trying to say that Donald Trump has somehow secured America's safety. What they are doing is not making America safer. In fact, it's a total and complete lie, because Donald Trump has failed to actually even secure the border. He's failed to stop illicit drugs like fentanyl from crossing the border. He's failed to secure sufficient staffing and technology to stop human trafficking and illicit drugs from crossing the border. He's failed to support local law enforcement and behavioral health programs to address the issues that are affecting our communities. And he's failed to even execute on the most basic thing that he said he would do, which was to pass immigration reform when he got into office. Here we are, Donald Trump. Where's your immigration bill? Oh, wait, you don't have one. That's right. Because none of this is actually about making America safer. In fact, all of this is making America weaker. He's dismantling our federal law enforcement that would actually go after cartels and drug traffickers. Over the last 6 weeks, Donald Trump has taken out the most senior FBI officials and the officials in our U.S. attorney's offices that were actually prosecuting the cases against the drug cartels. Donald Trump took out the law enforcement that were prosecuting those cases. So let's be real about that. He froze federal law enforcement funds all across the country. I have tribes in my district that still haven't had their DOJ grants reinstated. Let's be real about what's going on here. He's frozen funds to refugee resettlement and other immigrants groups permanently who have outstanding receipts. There are refugees and asylees that had waited decades to get to this country from war-torn parts of the world, and they literally had their flights canceled the last 2 weeks, while Donald Trump is sitting in the Oval Office and offering millionaire oligarchs a free ride into America with his gold visa program. Is this really about making America safe again? Is that really what he's about? Is that really what my colleagues across the aisle are about? Because what I can tell you, as a representative from a great city, the city of Albuquerque, a border state,
is that we know what makes our communities safer. It means we stop drugs from coming into our country and our communities. It means that we support and we fund our law enforcement. It means that we fund our behavioral health system. It means that we support our mayors, our tribal leaders, and our state officials. It means that we invest in them. It does not mean that we drag them in front of Congress for 4 hours. We yell at them. We tell them we're going to give them criminal referrals. The DOJ is intimidating our mayors. And my colleagues across the aisle are producing TV ads to try to pretend that they're making this country safe again. It's total bullshit. Absolute bullshit. They are not making America safer again, and what they are doing is terrorizing immigrant families. That is what they are doing. Parents who are afraid to send their kids to school, parents who are afraid that they won't come home again, kids who are afraid to leave their houses, refugees who have waited for years to come into this country. And our mayors are sitting here enduring this ridiculous hearing as they've been threatened in front of the American people. And so I will say, in the words of my sister in the front row who brought forward the words of one of our faith leaders just a few days ago on the House floor, I hope that my colleagues across the aisle, who I can tell, most of whom come from immigrant stock, will have the same mercy that our ancestors had shown to them by this country so that you could sit here and be a congressperson.
Gentlelady's time's expired. We're going to
ask the unanimous consent.
Ms. Crockett.
From The Economist, how Boston became the safest big city in America. Murder is declining across the country, but Boston has led the way. And then I have one more UC request. It is from insightcrime.org. Gang violence in Haiti continued to surge in 2024, following a trend that began after the assassination of President in 2021. The country reported a record number of homicides in 2024 with over 7,000 murders for a rate of 62%, up from 40.9% in 2023.
Without objections ordered, at the request of the witnesses, we're going to do one more questioner. It'll be Mr. Sessions from Texas. Then the committee will take a 15-minute break. Last questioner before the break at the request of the witnesses will be Mr. Sessions from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you for taking time to be here. I hasten to say that I'm probably not going to yell at you. I will not live up to the things that we've been accused of today, but I will say that I want to defend some actions that are being taken. I remember a few years ago when Boston had 2 illegal aliens who were they were known as criminal aliens, but they were known as on the watch list. They created a bomb that went off at the Boston Marathon. Only killed a couple people, but caused huge disruption. And it brought to light that the administration at the time and prior administration had allowed people who were on watch lists that we understood, terrorism, criminal, and we were allowing them in the country. We watched forward as we moved about the rule of law being ignored. United States of America allows 1 million people to go through our process, the largest amount of anywhere in the world, 1 million people, and they go through a process. And I spoke at one of these ceremonies, naturalization ceremonies last May. And I spoke to the people that were there. And they all unequivocally stated, thank you to the United States of America, but they learned what they were entering, what they were expected to do, that their customs from where they came from, some could be kept, but the things which did not correspond to American law now needed to be followed, that they were going to become American citizens, not where they came from, but they wanted to be Americans, and they had to follow those rules and regulations or laws. That we were very open to them being here and that they could legally perform the duties that they wanted. What has caused this mismatch is more than just the Boston bomber or people being killed, but rather the public interests in looking at what the charade that it caused all across this country, in particular in larger cities. Chicago, yes. New York City, yes. Other cities around the United States where people felt not only threatened, but it was activity that was seen as unbecoming to people who should be where they were and giving respect and thanks to a group of people who were allowing them to be here, i.e., a city that was not going to arrest them. But you see, what we really understood is if you were here illegally, they weren't going to arrest you even for a crime. They might have arrested someone who was a citizen and put them behind bars, but unless they really created a heinous circumstance, they were not going to be arrested. And so this created an aura around the United States that the American people understood. And that is one of the reasons why you saw the American people not only vote with their hands, but vote with their emotions about the need to bring back not just law and order, not just rule of law, but the ability that we had as an American people to rethink the entire issue. And I do understand you think that this is all broken in Washington, D.C. because you disagree with it. But what we've been allowing is the next president, whether it be Barack Obama, whether it be George W. Bush, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Joe Biden, to insist upon their own way instead of the law. The laws have been misguided, they've been misused, and they are taken advantage of. I think what we're trying to do today is to hear from you, not as we're accused, but rather thoughtful people, to hear you talk about your cities, the things which you encounter, and the things which you think are right. And by and large, and I've been in and out of this committee today, but we by and large heard it's more safe. It's not less safe. It's more safe because of what we do. And yet it comes at a cost and a price, and it creates circumstances. So I want to thank you for being here. I want you to remember that not everybody yelled and screamed at you. Some people actually showed up to listen. And that is what I did today. I want to thank each of you because your modeling that you have been doing is something that we do need to pay attention to. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Very good. The committee will take a 20-minute break. Pursuant to the previous order, the chair declares the committee in recess for 20 minutes.
We'd like to interrupt this hearing on Capitol Hill and change gears to the Karen Reed case, which is back in court at this hour, as both the prosecution and Reed's team continue their arguments on motions filed, including one to dismiss all of the charges. Let's listen in.
2022. That's the best he can do in his report. Paragraph 2. In July of 2023, so this is a little more defined, I was once again made aware by Trooper Proctor that a request had been made to Canton PD for additional video and that it was ready to be picked up. Since the Canton Police Department is conveniently located on my route of travel to work, I stopped by and picked up the CD from the front desk of the police department, which was labeled Trooper Buchanan with a yellow Post-it note. I further added Canton PD 12922, and then the case number, which is, or their case number, 2022-112-33, to note to more accurately identify the item and transported it to our office, subsequently turning it over to Trooper Proctor. So there's a second CD, now in July of 2023. I did not review that video at that time. See the attached copy of the Post-it note. Final paragraph. In my preparation for trial in May of 2024, I was provided with a thumb drive and the CD labeled with a Post-it note on my desk. What's interesting is that the CD with the Post-it note on his desk may or may not have been the same CD that he transported in July of 23 because they seem to be labeled a little differently.
So I haven't seen this report. Does he say from whom he received that?
I'll finish reading it, but I don't believe he does. No. No, it's pretty vague. It's passive voice and it's pretty vague. I was provided a thumb drive and a CD labeled with a Post-it on my desk to review prior to testimony, so it does not say. At this time, I reviewed video made available to me, which included video footage of the Canton PD exterior Sally Port. Exterior Sally Port. This video was labeled with a Post-it note on a CD, and it contained a video of the interior of the Sally Port, which was grainy and had a camera vantage point from the front of the Sally Port. I also reviewed the Canton PD driveway footage. In review, I also viewed video of the back wall Sally Port camera vantage point. I had not seen this video prior to my May date review. I later learned that this video was provided in an inverted manner. After I reviewed all the provided video, the thumb drive and the CD were returned. It doesn't say to whom they were returned. Your Honor, if I could mark this report as well.
Sure. Do you have an extra copy for me?
I do. It does have one highlight on it. May I show it to Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Are there two still marked?
So you do have an extra copy, Ms. Little?
I do not have an extra copy, Your Honor.
I thought Mr. Jackson just said he had an extra.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Jackson, do you have an extra copy?
I think I might.
I've got it right here.
You have an extra copy? Is that one clean?
Not clean, but.
Hang on a second. No, that was the only copy that I've got.
May I approach your Honor?
This one has highlights on it. I apologize.
It's okay. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. The court asked probably the most important question about this report, which is, who was it that supplied the video or the thumb drives or the CDs to Sergeant Buchanan? Who's at the center of all these Sally Port videos? Who does he say was requesting the Sally Port videos that he was acting as the courier for in other particulars? Every one of those answers is Michael Proctor. So who do we believe most reasonably would have supplied the information to Sergeant Buchanan to review? It stands to reason it could have been Trooper Proctor. It seems to be reasonable. But I don't know because Trooper Buchanan doesn't say, but that would be another question that would be open to answer if we had an evidentiary hearing. Michael Proctor was receiving the footage directly from DG Petro, dating all the way back to February of 2022. He was the one receiving the footage directly from Buchanan, dating all the way back to the spring of 2022. Michael Proctor was receiving footage from both sources multiple times through the years. Proctor was the one who clearly had possession, custody, and control over the exculpatory footage. It was his, every bit of it. And now let's recall what he said at trial when asked about all this footage, because he was confronted about footage. And keep in mind, Your Honor, when I'm asking these questions, I know none of this. None of it. Michael Proctor lied during his testimony, but he knew that we couldn't impeach him. There was no way I could impeach him. I didn't have any of these videos to impeach him with, because we didn't have any of the evidence that had been secured concerning that Sally Port. Question. There's surveillance video from Canton Police Department's Sally Port garage that wasn't turned over, right? Answer. That video was discovered later on and then handed over. That video was discovered later on.
So where in the transcript is that?
I can get you the page and line number, Your Honor.
My guess is Ms. Little can get it pretty quickly.
I'm guessing she
I'll get that to you
can.
in just a moment, Your Honor.
June 10th?
It was either June 10th or June 12th, but let me double check.
While she's looking for that, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Please go ahead, yep.
Okay. The only thing it's important to remember from a date standpoint, we'll get the date that he actually testified to this, but from a date standpoint, the only thing that had been handed over at the time that he testified to that was a single video with 42 minutes missing and a flatbed and the flatbed driveway footage outside the Sally Port that doesn't show much of anything. It's now been proven, that testimony, that video was discovered later on and then handed over, suggesting there was either only one video or all of it was discovered later and turned over. Both of the clauses in that sentence are a lie. The video wasn't discovered later. It was discovered in February, at the latest, February of 2022, just days after this incident. He asked for it, and he received it, according to Sergeant D.G. Petro. And it wasn't turned over either. None of it. But at trial, we didn't have the truth. I couldn't impeach him with this. He made sure that all the footage was delivered directly to him, starting days after this incident. And he controlled it, he hid it, and then he lied about it. That is the definition of bad faith. That is the definition of withholding exculpatory evidence. That is the definition of suppressing Brady evidence. There is no other way to define this. He fooled us, and it's egregious. Is it possible, with all this sort of years-long flurry that we've just talked about surrounding these Sally Port videos, that the actual trial prosecutors were completely unaware of their existence until Proctor testified before the federal grand jury? Is that possible? I suppose it is. I want to give the prosecutors the benefit of the doubt. I do. Is it reasonable? That's another question. To believe that they just knew nothing about this. We know Proctor lied to us. Could he have lied to them? I suppose. But as the law mandates, Your Honor, it just doesn't matter. In the eyes of the law, Proctor is the prosecution, and the prosecution is Michael Proctor. And then we move to January 28th, 2025, this year. We're still getting additional videos at that time. This new camera angle, which is blurry and grainy and wobbly, it does, however, show the passenger side rear taillight as it's towed into or driven into the Sally Port garage. The footage is so grainy and so blurry, however, it's so corrupted that once again, the true condition of that taillight is completely obscured. At a certain point, it begins to defy logic. And the reason I wanted to talk about each one of these videos in turn is because it absolutely defies logic that all of this footage magically cuts out, blurs out, becomes grainy, becomes obscured at the precise time that the SUV is pulled in to the Sally Port. The question then becomes, what's been happening to these videos that have been in Michael Proctor's possession since that time, for the last 2.5, 3 years? And again, I've lost count how many times the Commonwealth makes the claim, quote, prosecutors had never seen this video, end quote. The entirety of the Commonwealth's defense on this issue is the indefensible, which is, it just wasn't me. Okay, fine, it may not have been you, but it was the Commonwealth, in quotation marks, capital. The Commonwealth then claims that, quote, after directing a review of all physical evidence and data files, after directing a review of all physical evidence and data files, this video was located within a paper case file of the investigators, end quote. I believe that Mr. Brennan, when he came on the case, he's the one who directed a review of all physical evidence and data files. I would have to guess. Again, I would applaud that. Should have happened years ago. What's most curious about this video, however, is that the prosecution now admits, quote, after inquiry it was learned that an investigator obtained this video from Canton Police Department in 2022, and it was placed in a physical case file, end quote. That's a direct quote from their opposition. They don't name who the investigator is. They don't indicate whose case file it was. They don't tell us where that case file had been, who had control over that case file, just a paper case file somewhere, mysteriously. Whether it was CPD or MSP, we don't know. Which investigator, we still don't know. What can we learn from this admission by the Commonwealth? That investigators did, in fact, download the Canton PD videos in 2022 before they were overwritten. That's the only way these videos could exist. We've talked about that. And what we don't know is where the rest of them went, and why we don't have them, and why we didn't have them for the first trial. The Commonwealth basically concedes that it is in direct violation of its discovery obligations not to have turned over these videos that were in their possession. But it makes the claim that it doesn't matter because, quote, the poor quality of the video makes it difficult for either party to benefit from the video, end quote. In its opposition, it sounds like more of a desperate argument than anything else that these cumulative, that these egregious errors don't justify the court taking any action because they claim, quote, there's no evidence of bad faith. I would take issue with that. But the quote goes on, there's no evidence of bad faith on behalf of the Commonwealth, nor any of its agents, particularly where the Commonwealth is equally aggrieved by the poor video quality and inability to obtain a forensically extracted copy of the surveillance video. Equally aggrieved. First, in that sentence, the Commonwealth admits that the defense is aggrieved. They say they're equally aggrieved, however. Aggrieved means wronged or unfairly treated or suffered harm or injustice. Merriam-Webster defines aggrieved as suffering from an infringement or a denial of legal rights. You bet we're aggrieved. But the Commonwealth can't claim that they're aggrieved when they're the ones doing the aggrieving. It doesn't work that way. The Commonwealth concedes that there's irreparable harm. They acknowledge that the forensic videos were destroyed, or at least they claim now that they're destroyed. We can never obtain the information necessary to establish the validity of any of these videos or whether and by whom they may have been manipulated, if at all. The Commonwealth can't shift the blame because the videos have literally been in their possession the entire time. It was their actions and the actions of their agents that caused this irremediable harm. Your Honor, this is, as I said, this is the definition of bad faith, and this goes back to the court's original question this morning, which is, can you describe the prejudice that Ms. Reed has suffered? And I think we've done a pretty good job of describing that throughout this argument, but the definition of bad faith means we don't have to prove actual prejudice. Prejudice is presumed under the law. If we're to believe the declarations that were submitted by ADA Lally and ADA McLaughlin and ADA Brennan, then at the very least there is no other conclusion but that Michael Proctor and other investigators intentionally secured these videos. They withheld the evidence from us, and they withheld the evidence from the prosecution team. Let's take them at their word. Even after being explicitly instructed to turn over that evidence, that is bad faith. And how many times do they have to say, we didn't know about this, it just doesn't matter. Like I said, let's take them at their word. It doesn't absolve the Commonwealth of its obligations, and it doesn't reduce the prejudice that the defense has suffered. This was a pattern engaged in by the Massachusetts State Police, by the Canton Police Department, over and over and over again. And now we know, through this new revelation, that it was intentional. The prejudice the defense has suffered is legally presumed, and it's also factually proven, and thus the only remedy is dismissal. When is dismissal warranted? And this is, I'd like to talk for just a couple of seconds about the legal standards. Where there's misconduct that's so egregious, deliberate, and intentional, prejudice is to be presumed. That means that the defense is not required to show Ms. Reed suffered any actual prejudice because dismissal is necessary to prevent the repetition of this type of misconduct. And that comes to us directly from Bridgman versus District Attorney for Suffolk District at 476 Mass 298. It's a 2017 case. Even if the court does not, and this is secondary to that, even if the court does not presume the prejudice and find that these myriad violations were somehow inadvertent or a mistake, the result of some accident or negligence, this case still has to be dismissed under the second scenario and the second prong because Ms. Reed has suffered actual prejudice by the Commonwealth's violations. We could not cross-examine these witnesses the way they should have been cross-examined at the first trial. The repeated and flagrant discovery violations were not an accident. I think we've established that at this point. They weren't a mistake. There were too many people looking at them, strategizing about them, to then say, I didn't realize their import. They were designed specifically, the fact that we weren't provided the evidence was designed specifically to obtain a strategic advantage over the defense and to get a conviction at all costs rather than to pursue the truth. There are obviously additional Brady violations and prejudices that Ms. Reed has suffered. I've detailed those in our moving papers. And I want to incorporate all of those arguments by reference here as well. But relating to the surveillance footage itself, there's no question that the Commonwealth intentionally withheld it, and they've been withholding it since January 29th, 2022. The Commonwealth can't really seriously claim, Your Honor, that 4 or 5 or however many different law enforcement officers were aware of and withheld the surveillance video or the surveillance footage, and who were supposedly specifically instructed by Adam Lally or his team back in April of 2024 to turn everything over, and it was just inadvertently withheld. This was intentional. And the Commonwealth then compounded those violations by Michael Proctor lying on the stand about his knowledge of the video footage and his turning it over to the defense. It was literally a fraud on the jury. And now, well after trial, the Commonwealth has been forced to admit that even more exculpatory evidence or surveillance evidence from January 2022 is in their possession, and it was also entirely withheld from the defense throughout this litigation and throughout the first trial. In addition to the presumptive prejudice, Your Honor, there has been actual prejudice. This was, some would say, a close case when it ended. The court recalls that. The jury was hung on some charge or charges, and the evidence suggests that they voted in her favor on others. The court needs to ask itself, what would the jury have done had they had all the evidence to which they were entitled, to which we were entitled? But they didn't. Every one of these videos was in some way compromised, even the videos that we did have. And the compromise always conveniently obscured the truth and obscured Ms. Reed's rights. This is an exculpatory fact that we should have been able to explore during the past 3 years, and certainly we should have been able to explore it at trial, but we did not have the videos. The Commonwealth did, though, and it's the cumulative effect of all these gross and repeated violations that undermines the Commonwealth's argument that this is just about a broken camera. It couldn't be further from the truth. We're to believe that all these cameras just spontaneously became defective at the exact same time. Like I said before, it defies logic. For the Commonwealth to have all this footage for a solid 3 years and hold it back from us the entire time, it makes one question what was going on with that evidence. And I have to say, in terms of lesser remedies, Your Honor, what's interesting is that the exclusion, obviously the exclusionary rule exists.
I understand that does not help the defense.
It doesn't help the defense. And I appreciate the court finishing my thought on that. It's the opposite. The only remedy that can prevent this kind of repetition, this kind of misconduct, is dismissal. That's the only remedy available. And that's what the law, and that's what justice demands. As a final thought, if the court...
Many of you prepared for today's hearing by making sure that you got a little bit of information about immigrants and crime in your cities. Let me ask each of the mayors, just yes or no. Have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No,
from the
Congresswoman.
immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on. The Republicans put more effort into producing their little propaganda trailer for this hearing than they have into reforming America's immigration system, and that's why we're here today. In fact, Republicans are beating up on the vast majority of you about what you're doing for your citizens, but the last time I checked, you're actually showing up. You may or may not be aware, but the NRCC just instructed Republicans to stop their town hall meetings because their constituents were showing up and telling them to do your jobs. If I had to sum up some of what you have said thus far today, I would sum it up as you have been trying to tell them as politely as you can to do their jobs. In fact, we know that they have not done their jobs, and so they're trying to force you to do it for them by turning your local law enforcement officers into ICE agents. They have this fake outrage about how immigrants are stealing resources and jobs from Americans when residents of Boston, Chicago, New York City, and Denver are subsidizing public services in their districts and their states because the Republicans refuse to ensure that their constituents earn a livable wage. Look, they don't have a plan to fix immigration in America because they don't want to. Mass deportation isn't a plan. Arresting kids in schools or worshipers in church isn't a plan. But there are important points to discuss as it relates to immigration in America. So, Mr. Beer, in January, you testified before the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Integrity, Security, and Enforcement. During that hearing, we played a little game called Rhetoric or Reality. Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead for round two, why don't we? Rhetoric or reality? Immigrants are a burden to the American taxpayers because they deplete our federal resources.
That would be rhetoric.
Correct. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that immigrants will lower U.S. deficits by a cumulative $1 trillion and increase the U.S. economy's size by nearly $9 trillion over 10 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In 2023, 47 million immigrants paid nearly $652 billion in taxes, $58.1 billion in taxes alone into Texas. Rhetoric or reality? During his first administration, Trump improved enforcement of U.S. immigration laws.
He did not.
In fact, President Trump closed almost all immigration courts for removal proceedings, cut prosecutions for unauthorized entry by 87%, cut ICE removals to the lowest level in the history of the agency, and released 9,000 people with violent crime convictions back into our communities. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So rhetoric or reality? President Trump's immigration policies make American communities safer.
No, they don't make communities safer.
In fact, nearly 100,000 unauthorized immigrants have obtained legal status through their cooperation with law enforcement. And local law enforcement agencies have more than 300,000 pending requests for immigrants seeking legal status based upon their cooperation with law enforcement, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Is that correct?
That's right. Immigrants work with law enforcement to stop and solve crimes.
Thank you. That was one of my rhetoric or reality questions. Sorry. The question was immigrants without legal status can help stop crime. That's correct.
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
All right. And Mr. Beer, isn't it true that Republicans are threatening to illegally strip cities of law enforcement grants intended for local policing and public safety if they don't go along with Trump's immigration agenda?
That's right. They want to redistribute the fiscal burden onto the Democratic cities and away from the Republican ones.
Which brings me to my next point. Mayor Adams, do you believe that President Trump is weaponizing the Department of Justice against local governments like New York City?
As I stated publicly, Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. And as I indicated previously, this case is in front of Judge Ho, and I'm going to allow the judicial process to go forward.
Well, let me ask it a different way. There was a quote from Mr. Well, he had to get advice. So can I just get a...
What's that?
He was getting advice. So can I get a little bit of time? I didn't interrupt while he was getting advice.
Time because they were advising him.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is the last one. There was a quote from Mr. Homan, I believe, where he said he will be in your office and up your butt if there was a problem with whatever agreement. We don't know what it was. My question to you, I know you've been asked about it a couple of times today, is was he lying when he said that you made an agreement that would cause him to be up your butt if you failed to uphold your end of it?
And gentlelady's time's expired, but if the mayor wants to answer it, he can.
Congresswoman, I answered that question, and it appears as though we're asking the same questions over and over and over again. My comments are not going to change. No quid pro quo, no agreement. I did nothing wrong.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, mayors, for being here. You all represent cities that should be beacons of opportunities for young professionals, entrepreneurs, and hardworking Americans that want to make it in this world. Not the laughing stocks that they've become in many ways. New York was once hailed as the capital of the world. Boston was admired for its founding role in America. Chicago was the gateway to the West and the icon of the Great Lakes. And Denver was admired for its natural beauty. Now all these cities are seen as a place where illegal immigrants, violent criminals, and gang members thrive, breaking our laws and spreading fear throughout our communities. Let's be clear. Sanctuary policies have not just failed, they've made our cities less safe and less welcoming to those who truly want to contribute to our communities. Here's a perfect example. Laken Riley's murderer was arrested in New York City on charges of detaining a minor. He was released due to New York State's sanctuary status. He was then allowed to go on to Georgia, where he murdered Laken in cold blood. Last night in my district, 400 miles from New York City, 2 members of Tren de Aragua gang were arrested for an ATM jackpotting scheme that stole more than $100,000. The suspects were also wanted for similar crimes throughout the state of New York, and in your state's Mayor Johnson and Mayor Wu for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, God only knows what else these dangerous gang members are responsible for. Buffalo ICE recently arrested an illegal from Peru who had murdered 23 people and had the victims' faces tattooed on his body. He was allowed to evade law enforcement for a long time due to New York State's green light law that protected him and shielded DMV data from federal law enforcement officials. There is no such thing as a victimless crime. Every crime has a victim, and these victims, they don't have a sanctuary. They have to live with the pain and the trauma of something being taken from them, their safety, their security, their property, and to add insult to injury, the witnesses before us have protected the perpetrators. Mayor Wu, the other day, you stunningly expressed sympathy for the man responsible for the knife attack, not the brave officer who stopped him. Where is the sympathy for the men and women in law enforcement trying to keep us safe?
Congressman,
where
check your
is this?
facts.
It's my time.
Check your facts. Watch the video.
It's my time.
I did not express sympathy for that
Where is the
individual, but for
sympathy
their
for the
family.
victims?
And any individual
I haven't
whose
asked
life
you a
is
question.
lost is a tragedy.
It's appalling to me that we even have to ask for sympathy for victims instead of violent criminals. But here we are. And to all the mayors before us, hindsight being 20/20 is a blessing and a curse. You can't go back in time, but it should give you clarity for the future. Laken's murderer, Jose Ibarra, had demonstrated he was a danger to society. He should have been detained by ICE. I want to ask each of you, yes or no. Do you agree that someone who demonstrates a willingness to harm society should be detained by immigration officials? Mayor Adams. Yes or no?
Within the confines and restrictions of the law, yes, I do.
Okay. Mayor Johnson.
Someone that's committed a crime, yes. Someone that's committed a crime, yes, should be detained, and we would help them.
Every violent criminal should be held accountable, and that's why crime is down in the city of Chicago, because we're doing just that.
Mayor Wu.
If you commit crimes against the people of Boston, you'll be prosecuted.
Another yes or no question. Has anything that's happened in this country in the last 3 years given you reason to consider removing sanctuary city status from your communities? Mayor Adams.
I'm clear that what we do is prevent some of these crimes from taking place.
Mayor Johnson.
We think the system that we have works, and we will keep it.
Violent crime is down in Chicago because of welcoming city ordinance.
Have you considered removing sanctuary city status?
Well, violent crime is down in the city of Chicago under my leadership, and we're going to continue to do what we have to do to ensure that that continues.
Mayor Wu.
We are the safest major city in the country, in part because people trust that they can call 911 and help police solve crimes.
Have you considered removing sanctuary city status?
We are going to continue to keep our policies in place that have been working for the people of Boston.
I think you've answered the question. The American people are fed up with the policies that protect criminals, waste taxpayer dollars, and prioritize illegal immigrants over the safety and well-being of hardworking citizens. Your cities, once shining beacons of opportunity, have now become a symbol of failure in leadership. The time for excuses is over, and the American people demand that you take responsibility, abandon these reckless policies, and start putting the safety of your constituents first. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chair, I have a unanimous consent.
Who said that?
From usafacts.org, which states rely the most on federal aid? The number 3 highest proportion of federal funding that a state relies upon is the state of Kentucky, your state, Mr. Chair.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Simon from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member. Mayors, it's really a pleasure to hear from you today. And Ms. Sue, I was able to meet your sleeping daughter outside, and as a mother myself, I know the care that you are taking not only for your own family, but for our communities. But to all of you, thank you for being here today for so many hours. Just quickly, you know, when I came to Congress, I was under the impression that both members of Congress and folks who are in the federal government take heed to the history of this country. I would love for members of Congress and on this committee to contact the Congressional Research Service and look at the ordinances and the authors who created ordinances of sundown towns. That animus is almost mirrored with the conversations today about our immigrant communities. So when you get in your Uber and when you talk to your nurse and when you go home, I want you to look in the face of the folks that you are disrespecting today. The real crisis is a crisis to me and many who study this issue for a career. It's a broken asylum system. Right now, 3.7 million folks are in this country waiting, and they have waited years, meeting these folks fleeing violence for years, are waiting for an immigration system that works. That is not on the duty of these mayors. It is our job. It's the federal government's job. Create an asylum system that honestly purports what we say on the base of the Statue of Liberty, and let's get that work done. Don't blame our mayors who are supporting young people and elders and bringing in federal dollars for health care. I want to yield my time to the gentle lady from New York, Ms. Cortez.
I thank the Congresswoman. I'd like to start with some questions prior to my recognized questions. Mayor Adams, on January 31st of 2025, your attorneys met with federal prosecutors regarding the charges of bribery, campaign finance fraud, and conspiracy against you. Were you aware of this meeting prior to its occurrence?
Congresswoman, as I...
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. As I stated to your colleagues, and I'm going to continue to state because we're asking the same question over and over again.
This is a new question.
This case is in front of Judge Ho, and out of deference to
I understand, Mayor Adams.
Process, I'm going to
Mayor Adams, as your counsel, I'm sure will inform you. The only permissible way to refuse to answer a question during a congressional proceeding such as this is by pleading the Fifth Amendment. Deference to the judge is not a permissible excuse for not answering questions during a congressional hearing. Is it your intention to plead the Fifth today?
Councilwoman, you said the only way that you can't answer a question is to plead the Fifth. I am answering your question. I'm answering your question directly. That
you are not, Mayor Adams.
Okay, I believe I am.
I will ask it again. Were you aware of the meeting between your attorneys and federal prosecutors on January 31st? Answering this question is a yes or a no.
And I'm going to answer it again. Out of deference to Judge Holt with this case.
That is not an answer, Mayor Adams.
He is going to deal with the outcome of the case.
Mayor Adams, is it your intention to not comply with these questions?
As I stated, I'm answering your questions, and what you're doing, let's be clear on, you're asking me about communications between my attorney and I. And I don't think that is appropriate to be asking a question between my attorney and I, because we are in a country of law and order.
I understand.
And your
So, Mayor
relationship
Adams,
and
who
communications
is
with
your
your attorney should be respected.
Who is your attorney?
Alex Spiro.
Alex Spiro, thank you. Now, Mayor Adams, have your attorneys ever met with city officials? That is not covered. I'm not asking about your conversations with your attorneys. Have your attorneys met with city officials, New York City officials?
Any communication or activity between my attorney
Yes or
and I
no?
is
Have
up to
your
our attorney
have your
and I.
personal
You can reach out
attorneys
to,
met with New York City officials?
Alex Spiro, my attorney, to deal with those communications.
Mayor Adams, in this meeting, did anyone representing you, including perhaps Mr. Spiro, agree or allude to any arrangement with the Trump administration that would involve changing city policies in exchange to reconsideration of the charges brought against you?
You say in this meeting? Can you be clear?
In the January
on
31st meeting.
Again, there was never any agreement, never any quid pro quo. And
That's not what I'm
nothing
asking.
wrong. Never any agreement, never any quid pro quo.
Was there an allusion
and nothing,
to
and
a
nothing
shift
that
in
I've
New York
done
City
wrong.
policy?
Gentlelady's time's expired. And I just want to remind her, Mayor Adams is here voluntarily, and we appreciate that. The topic of the hearing is about our illegal alien problem and the drain on the cities and what the solution is. So, Chair now recognize Mr. McGuire from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this important hearing. The American people deserve answers on the disastrous policies of sanctuary cities. As a veteran, as a Navy SEAL, I hope what I'm about to say is common sense. If somebody saved your life on the battlefield, you wouldn't care if they were pink or blue or male or female or Democrat, Republican, or independent. We're all people. This is not a race, religion, or creed thing. This is our American people. We the people are being robbed, raped, and killed by these criminals that are coming across our border. My first question is just a yes or no. Do you believe that someone who breaks the law is a criminal? Mayor Adams.
Yes, I do.
Next.
If you've broken criminal law,
Just simple yes or no.
Did you answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you repeat your question again?
If you commit a crime, are you a criminal? Yes or no?
If you commit a crime, you should be held accountable. Absolutely.
I don't use that label depending on what it is, like a speeding
I
ticket, for
understand.
example.
Next. Well, I got to tell you guys, thank God we have President Trump in the White House. Thank God we have the border czar, Tom Homan. Thank God we have Mike Johnson as a speaker. Thank God we have Leader Thune in the Senate. And thank God we have Hegseth, Rubio, and everyone else. Over the last 4 years, the American people have been robbed, raped, and killed. And the left doesn't talk about that. They want to say that people might be scared in their homes. Well, what about the families whose members have been killed and persecuted? The border has been cleaned up in just a matter of weeks. Border crossings are down 97% in just a matter of weeks. And over the last 4 years, we've been getting lip service like we want to secure the border. 80% of Americans believe we should secure the southern border. We are all elected leaders, and I assume you all sought these positions to help your citizens improve the quality of life in your city. It appears to me that left-wing activists want to create wedges in our society and cause the mayors of our great cities to ignore the oath of office and to support rule of law. Each of you took an oath that included an oath to support the Constitution of the United States, correct?
Yes.
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 Are you aware
Correct.
that Article 6, Section 2 makes laws of the United States supreme, known as the Supremacy Clause? Is everybody aware of this?
Yes.
I'm shocked
Yes.
that you all, as elected leaders, flaunt violating federal laws as if you are running a political campaign. We are a nation of laws. We lose credibility as a nation when we disregard or ignore the law and the people die. As of July 24th, there are more than 660,000 illegal aliens from criminal backgrounds roaming the United States. It is estimated that a total added cost of illegal aliens nationwide is $150 billion per year since the start of 2023. The federal government has spent more than $1.45 billion reimbursing local jurisdictions and non-governmental organizations that provide travel, shelter, and other service to illegal aliens. What about homeless veterans that are living on the street? What about Hurricane Helene victims that are still suffering in North Carolina? What about those folks that are suffering from the forest fires in Los Angeles? Chicago has spent over $639 million. Denver spent over $365 million. Boston is spending potentially, well, about $1 billion annually. And New York City estimates it could potentially spend $12 billion on illegal aliens from 2022 through fiscal year 2025. If you were the president and you found that your cities were spending billions of dollars against the interests of your citizens in violation of the Supremacy Clause, don't you think you would have cause to consider withholding federal funding, yes or no? No answer?
No, because we've not violated any federal law.
Yes, you are making the taxpayers of this nation foot your bill for your potential whims that you don't agree with is wrong, and that is getting people killed. Mayor Wu, in the Boston area alone, Tom Homan said there are at least 9 accused child rapists.
That is inaccurate. That is false. That is false. I'd like to see the facts on that. Again, put him under oath and ask the questions here.
How could you do that to your citizens? It sounds like you care more about your politics than the safety of your citizens. Imagine the parents of those children abused by someone you all released into society.
Congressman, our safety statistics are the lowest in the country, lower than your district.
A little girl was age 14, was raped by an illegal alien. He was released from jail 4 times because it seems, and a lot of you guys on the left, you believe that criminals are good, police are bad, and no one cares about the victims. This horrific crime was avoidable, but it was sanctuary policies like yours that allowed the offender to travel to the U.S. and end up in my district. And with that, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Min from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to take a moment just to note that once again this committee is failing to do its job and actually exercise oversight in the way it should. My phones are ringing off the hook with people who are angry as hell about what they see as the rampant corruption of this administration, the illegal activities of Elon Musk and Doge, and the massive cuts to Medicaid that Republicans voted for last week. Literally not one person has called to ask about the immigration enforcement priorities of the cities I represent, let alone Boston or Chicago. This hearing is an attempt to distract from the actual waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse that is happening at unprecedented levels in this country right now. So thank you to the witnesses. I want to start off with a few simple yes-no questions for you all. First, please raise your hand for the mayors if you are aware of any laws or policies that prevent federal authorities from enforcing immigration in your city. Okay, no hands are raised. Please raise your hand if you're aware of any cities or states in America that have laws or policies that prevent federal authorities from enforcing immigration law. Any cities or states. Okay, I just want to know for the record again, there are no hands up. And as your answers make clear, this whole sanctuary city, quote unquote, debate is a sham. There's no place in America, not one, that actually provides sanctuary from federal law, period. The real issue here is whether state and local governments should spend scarce taxpayer dollars to help the federal government enforce its immigration priorities. Whether local police should spend their time focused on their actual jobs, keeping our streets safe, apprehending violent criminals, solving crimes, or whether they should be deputized to help enforce federal immigration laws. And a lot of cities and states, including my state of California, have made the very reasonable decision to say, hey, we want our teachers, nurses, doctors, cops, firefighters to focus on their actual jobs and not be dragged into this Republican war on immigrants. And let's be clear, the Republican immigration policies being pushed forward right now are counterproductive and will make us far less safe, something several of our mayors pointed out in their testimony. Look, I support a 100% ban on all illegal border crossings, but the reality is we already have over 10 million people here in this country without proper immigration status, many of whom have been here for decades. And if you have ICE agents patrolling our courthouses, police stations, and hospitals, that means that those undocumented immigrants are not going to go anywhere, but they are going to stop reporting crimes or seeking medical care, and this makes us all less safe from the rapists and murderers out there. Now, recently, my Orange County Sheriff, Don Barnes, a staunch conservative, issued a statement outlining his position on immigration enforcement. And here's what he stated. The Orange County Sheriff's Department does not enforce federal immigration law. It is not part of our primary mission, and we remain focused on violations of state and local laws. The department will provide for your safety and respond to your calls for service regardless of your immigration status. We do not and never will ask the immigration status of victims, witnesses, suspects, or those who call to report crimes. We enforce state and local laws equally without bias and without concern for your citizenship. Now, I actually think this is a pretty good summary of what each of you are describing happens in your cities, a situation where the federal government enforces immigration law while states and local authorities enforce state and local laws, and it makes a lot of sense. I don't know what my colleagues on the other side think, but I don't want my police focused on immigration status and asking people about that. I want them focused on preventing violent crimes. But with that, I want to shift gears to address Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor, as has been well discussed in this committee, you are the first sitting mayor in modern New York City history to be indicted while in office. Last year, of course, you were charged with numerous felony counts for soliciting and accepting bribes for nearly a decade from foreign nationals, businessmen, and others, including illegal campaign contributions and luxury travel. On February 10th of this year, the Trump Justice Department instructed federal prosecutors to drop charges against you. This decision caused 7 federal prosecutors, including a Trump appointee, to resign because they believed this was such an enormous miscarriage of the rule of law in law enforcement. Now, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, this was widely reported as a quid pro quo. I know you've denied that. I know you're probably limited in what you can say. But a lot of people out there, including a lot of people in New York City that I know, believe that these charges were dropped in exchange for a quid pro quo for your agreement to help the Trump administration enforce its immigration policies. So my question for you, Mayor Adams, is actually a very simple one. It's clear that whatever your intentions, whatever actions you take, whether on immigration or anything else, you do not enjoy the trust and confidence of the people of New York City. So my question is, why haven't you not resigned yet, and do you plan to resign today or anytime soon?
I'm really surprised after you laid out your strong belief in the country
It's a yes/no question.
And what we stand for, that
Why
you are
haven't you
acting
resigned
to
yet,
take away
Mayor
the
Adams?
power
Why have you
of
not
the
resigned
people.
yet?
The people
not
of
a
the
question that gets
city
to your
elected
lawyers.
me to be
Why
the
have you
mayor,
not resigned yet?
and you
Please answer
should
the
not be a
question.
hypocrite and ask the people of the city power to be reserved for them.
Why have you not
I
resigned
was
yet, and
elected
do
by
you
the people of the
intend to
city,
resign anytime
and you
soon,
don't
Mayor?
live in the
Gentleman's
city.
time's expired. Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Jack from Georgia.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for convening this hearing, and I'd like to begin by offering some thoughts about our colleague from Texas, Congressman Sylvester Turner, who sadly just passed away, as some of you may know. Congressman Turner was a former 2-term mayor of Houston, and as our witnesses can no doubt attest, being the mayor of a big city is not easy. Congressman Turner was a member of our freshman class, and his office is right next to mine in the Longworth House Office Building, and as such, I had an opportunity to walk with him to and from votes, found him to be an incredible gentleman with respect and courtesy. My colleagues across the aisle, particularly the freshmen, knew Congressman Turner better than I, so I certainly yield to them on this topic, but I wanted to at least mention my own thoughts for the record. Now, to the topic of today's hearing, I prepared for today's hearing by chatting with some of the mayors from my district, from those who represent just a few hundred to those who represent a few thousand, and I found a common theme of frustration. They, along with me and many other constituents I proudly represent in Georgia's 3rd Congressional District, want to know why policies are in place that benefit citizens of other countries at the expense of citizens of our own country. So if I could, Mayor Johnson, I'd like to start with you from Denver. I know Chairman Comer, in his opening line of questioning, discussed an ordinance passed by the Denver City Council in 2017, and I recognize you had just left the state Senate by then. But this ordinance prohibits city and county employees from assisting the enforcement of federal laws or inquiring about a person's immigration status. So I just have to ask, do you see a benefit in learning whether or not someone charged with a crime is a citizen of another country?
Thank you, Congressman. I do just want to say Mayor Turner hosted me in Houston when I first became mayor, so that's a powerful statement for me. Thank you for acknowledging it. Thank you, sir. We don't ask someone's status when we first contact them because it's not relevant to whatever charges we may be pursuing. They may list their country of origin on a document that we ask for. It does not indicate their immigration status. They could have legal status but be from another country.
Thank you. Mayor Johnson of Chicago, do you see a benefit in asking someone charged with a crime whether or not they're a citizen of our country?
The benefit of community safety is trust between local residents and law enforcement, and that relationship is critical to driving violence down. Under my leadership, violence has gone down in the city of Chicago.
And Mayor Johnson, if I can ask, have you ever disciplined, fired, or arrested law enforcement officers or correction officers if they notified ICE or other federal immigration officers of an illegal criminal alien in lockup or courts in violation of your sanctuary city policies? Have you ever disciplined, fired, or arrested a law enforcement officer that worked with ICE?
That is not, I don't believe that's under the jurisdiction of the mayor. I don't arrest people or.
Are there issued memos in which you direct Chicago officers from not assisting with enforcement in immigration law or helping ICE identify folks who may not be here illegally?
We do have documentation around making sure that the residents of the city of Chicago know their rights. That's important because it builds trust between law enforcement and community. By having that confidence and trust, people are more likely to come forward to report violent crime regardless of their immigration status.
Well, I have to submit to the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from News Nation Now, January 21st, 2025, in which it says Chicago police reminded they cannot cooperate with deportations. And if I may ask, Mayor, are there any memos? Thank you. Are there any memos that direct Chicago police to not cooperate with President Trump's deportation plans?
Well, so local law enforcement, we're not federal agents. So local law enforcement in the city of Chicago, they do not dub as federal agents.
But that having been said, from your mayoral office, have you ever issued memos to the police department instructing them not to cooperate with President Trump?
We remind people of what the Welcoming City Ordinance entails.
Would you submit to the committee any written documentation to the Chicago Police Department as it relates to this?
For the Welcoming City Ordinance, we're happy to make sure that this body has that ordinance, and that policy has been around for 40 years.
Thank you very much. Mayor Wu, back to my line of questioning with Mayor Johnston and John Sten. Do you believe that if you are asking someone who's been charged with a crime, whether or not they're here in our country legally, is that a proper and beneficial thing to do?
The laws of Massachusetts and the Boston Trust Act help Boston police solve crimes. We do not ask for immigration status because it allows for people to trust that when they call 911, when they have information that might help bring justice to another family, that they feel comfortable sharing that.
Thank you. And Mayor Adams, in closing, obviously you know the police very well. Do you see a benefit in asking folks who've been charged with a crime whether or not they're a legal citizen?
Yes, I do.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Gillen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one thing everybody seems to agree on here is that our immigration system is broken and desperately needs to be fixed. And I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to work together with us to fix our broken immigration system, to fix our broken asylum system, which isn't fixed by firing the top immigration judges who can actually help us fix this problem. But my focus here today is the effect on my constituents on Long Island. Every day, my constituents are dealing with the effects of the failure to secure our border and the influx of more than 670,000 migrants who have come into the state and New York City, putting a strain on our schools, on public safety and law enforcement, and local governments. Mayor Adams, you said your top priority is to keep New Yorkers safe, but under your watch, the exact opposite has happened. Instead of effectively governing our city, your policies have compounded this crisis. New York has housed migrants in the Roosevelt Hotel for nearly 2 years, not only giving them food and shelter, but also debit cards. In New York, taxpayers have paid about, as you acknowledge, $7 billion to respond to this crisis. That figure is outrageous. And now, instead of stopping the bleeding, you're going back and asking the taxpayers of New York to spend another $1 billion on this crisis. While you focused on your own personal problems, crime has skyrocketed in New York, increasing 20% since you took office in 2021. An AP poll has said that the majority of Americans agree that undocumented people who commit violent crimes should be deported, including 79% of Democrats. But what have you done? I was astounded to hear that ICE was prevented even if they knew there were gang members in the Roosevelt Hotel, from actually doing anything to get those gang members out of there. Mayor Adams, what have you done and what is your answer to the taxpayers of New York for the money that has been spent on this crisis?
You raise several things, and there's a level of inaccuracy in some of the stuff you raise. When you look at our crime numbers, I'm not sure where you got those from, but we could give you an accurate account of our crime numbers. Crime has continued to drop since I've been the mayor of the city. We have removed over 20,000 illegal guns off our street. And although we had 230,000 migrants and asylum seekers that came to our door, 189,000 were able to go on to the next step of their journey. We manage a crisis. Congress makes our immigration policies, not mayors. I manage a crisis that was dropped at my door, and I continue to do that every day, and I'm proud of what my team did coming out of COVID and managing this crisis as well. Our city has more private sector jobs in the history of the city. We received our bond rating increase and stabilized. Our city is functioning, and we're going to continue to do the job that I was elected to do.
So spending $8 million is $1 billion is a good job. Mayor Adams, what you said today has given me no confidence in your ability to continue to serve and lead our city.
But you don't live in New York City. You live on Long Island. You don't vote for me.
Mayor, and you should resign. And I said that before you made your deal with Donald Trump.
Thank God you don't live in New York City. You live on Long Island.
But
people
the
of
problems
city,
of New York City
people of
affect
city
my
elect
constituents
people
who
of
work
New York
in Long
City
Island,
elected.
who work in Manhattan, whose kids live in Manhattan, who go to the doctor in Manhattan. Everything that happens in Manhattan affects my constituents, Mayor. I yield back.
Would the gentlelady yield to me, please? I thank the gentlelady. My question, Mr. Beer. We've heard a lot about crime. So the overwhelming majority of crime in the United States is committed by undocumented individuals whose immigration status is dubious. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct at all. The overwhelming majority of crime is committed by U.S.-born Americans.
So if I wanted to demonize naturally born Americans, I could cherry pick crime rates from that population and demonize them and dramatize that and use it to smear an entire subgroup in the population. In this case, the majority group. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. You could look at people with driver's licenses and say, man, they're committing a lot of crime. We should stop issuing driver's licenses to people.
I think that's really the sham and the shame of what people are doing in terms of political exploitation of a population this country needs if we're going to grow and protect the social safety net for the future. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming before our committee today. In the past 4 years, our nation has been invaded by millions and millions of people who have crossed our border. There's also millions of what's called known gotaways. These are people that our government has no idea where they came from, who they are, what they're going to do in our country. And many of these known gotaways could be criminals. They could be part of the narco cartels. They could be terrorists. We don't know who they are, and there's millions of them here. This country has also been the victim of fentanyl. This is a dangerous chemical that comes from China, is made into pressed pills in Mexico and Canada, and illegally distributed into our country by the cartels. On average, 200 to 300 Americans die every single day from fentanyl. Not die, they're murdered. They're murdered. Americans have also been victims of all types of illegal alien crimes. One family in particular, Laken Riley's family, I know them personally, and her death was absolutely horrific. Jose Ibarra entered the United States illegally on September 8th, 2022, near El Paso, Texas, with his wife and son. He was detained by the U.S. Border Patrol, but soon released due to overcrowding at detention facilities. After his release, he was transported to New York City, arriving around September 15, 2022. The following summer, he was arrested by New York Police Department and charged with acting in a manner to injure a child. Injure a child. And a driver's license violation. Before an immigration detainer could be issued, NYPD released Ibarra according to ICE. He later, after this release, moved to Athens, Georgia, where he was cited for a misdemeanor for shoplifting in 2023. This guy got arrested multiple times. He was stopped at the border, but he was continually released. Just a few months later, he brutally murdered Laken Riley. Mayor Adams, do you agree that Laken Riley would still be alive today if New York Police Department hadn't released Jose Ibarra after they arrested him?
Despicable crime. And as a former law enforcement officer, I respond to these crimes as a mayor as well. And I believe people like that should be held accountable. And I've advocated to stop this revolving door criminal justice systems like him to come out and hurt innocent people. I wish we would have had the power to prevent that from happening.
Mayor Adams, will you continue sanctuary city policies in your city?
That policy is by law. I do not make the law. I must operate within the confines of the Constitution and the law.
Mayor Adams, will you advocate to get rid of sanctuary city policies in the city of New York?
I have made it clear on a portion of the sanctuary city policies that I believe we need to alter to prevent crimes like this from taking place.
Federal law under 8 U.S.C. 1324 makes it a crime to knowingly harbor and shield illegal aliens from detection, but your cities refuse to work with ICE detainers to help them find these criminals. I'll go one at a time. Mayor Adams, will you work with ICE in New York City, yes or no?
ICE is part of our criminal justice apparatus, and I will work with my city, state, and federal agencies to keep our cities safe, no matter who they are.
Mayor Johnson, will you work with ICE to protect your city?
We do work with ICE right now, Congresswoman. When they send us information about someone they would like access to, we send them notice when and where we will release them, and they can pick them up. We've done that 1,226 times. We will keep doing it.
Will you end sanctuary city policies?
We think the policies that we have right now allow us to work with ICE and to stop crime, and we'll keep doing that.
Mayor Johnson, will you work with ICE?
Our local law enforcement, Chicago Police Department, we work with federal agents on a variety of issues, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, getting guns off the street, and we will continue to work with federal agencies.
Will you stop harboring illegal aliens? Will you end sanctuary city policies?
So the city of Chicago, we do not harbor criminals. We do not harbor undocumented individuals. We comply with all laws.
Mayor Wu, will you work with ICE to protect Americans, legal Americans in your city, and end sanctuary policies?
The Boston Police work with ICE and federal agencies every single day on criminal matters and hold people who are committing crimes accountable.
Chairman, if I may, I'd like to enter for the record, according to the U.S. Constitution, giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States is an act of treason, and those that violate that should be
Without
be
objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Chair Dale recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, Mayor Adams, are you aware that the former acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon was present at the January 31st meeting between your lawyers and federal prosecutors?
As I stated, and you, Congresswoman, you appear to want to ask the question over and over again, and so I could only give you the appropriate question over and over again. That this
okay, I understand, Mayor Adams. Are you not answering this question because you believe you will incriminate yourself?
To the movement of
I understand.
this case.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit to the congressional record Danielle Sassoon's resignation letter from the U.S. Attorney.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so much. In her letter, the former acting U.S. Attorney, a registered Republican, a former clerk for Antonin Scalia, was appointed by President Trump to serve as acting U.S. Attorney was present at the January 31st meeting between Mayor Adams' attorneys and federal prosecutors. After that meeting with attorneys, the acting U.S. attorney resigned rather than dismiss the charges against Mayor Adams. In her letter, which I have just submitted to the congressional record, Ms. Sassoon stated that during that January 31st meeting, Mayor Adams' attorneys, quote, repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, describing it as a, quote, improper offer of immigration enforcement assistance in exchange for a dismissal of his case, end quote. The acting U.S. attorney has submitted a former acting U.S. attorney has submitted a letter. And Mayor Adams, do you know how many federal prosecutors total resigned rather than file the motion to drop the charges?
It was reported that 7.
7, correct. Mr. Chair, I would like to submit another letter from Hagan Scotton, his resignation letter.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Scotton was an assistant U.S. attorney who also attended the January 31st meeting between your attorneys and federal prosecutors. He also resigned rather than drop the charges. In his resignation letter, he stated, and I quote, "Our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials." 7 federal prosecutors, the acting U.S. attorney, the assistant U.S. attorney, all gave up their entire careers, Republicans included, then drop these charges because of what they saw transpire in that January 31st meeting. This is important not just for the city of New York, but for the people of the United States of America. Because what is being alleged is genuinely not just about what may or may not have occurred from the mayor's office and with the mayor, but what is happening at the Department of Justice. And that's what I want everyone to understand. These are not Democratic U.S. attorneys. These are Republican U.S. attorneys that have trained under Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices who have stated that there is and suggested as well, that the prosecutorial power at the Department of Justice may be influencing what is occurring. And instead of carrying that out, and carrying out the erosion at the Department of Justice, they would have preferred to give up their entire career. 7 lifelong public servants involved in law enforcement, mind you. And to that, when it comes to the fact that this may or may not have anything to do with this hearing, respectfully, Mr. Chairman, this is about specifically immigration enforcement in terms of that. And this right here is the 4-alarm fire that everyone must be paying attention to. Because if it's not just in the mayor's office of New York City, what other city, what other individual, what other municipality leader can be next? For a party that talks about states' rights and municipal rights, we must defend, yes, the rule of law, including in the Department of Justice. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. LaHood from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to wave on to this important committee hearing today. I want to thank the witnesses. I represent a district right outside of Chicago, the excerpts of Chicago representing Rockford, Bloomington Normal, Peoria. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. It's past time that individuals like the mayors we have before us come before us and explain to the American people why you continue to fail to enforce the laws of our country and allow illegal immigrants to flood into our communities. And it's clear to me that sanctuary city policies have significantly harmed our once great cities, which is very, very unfortunate. During my time as an elected official, I have strongly condemned the policy around sanctuary cities and the impact it's had on the state of Illinois. And I believe every sensible resident in Illinois knows These policies have further harmed the economy in Illinois, increased crime throughout our state, and endangered hardworking, law-abiding Illinois citizens. I want to turn my attention to you, Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago. As I've watched you over the last 2 years that you've been mayor, I've been amazed at how tone deaf you have been and how oblivious you've been to the decline of Chicago. And I say that looking objectively at a number of things. Out of control crime in Chicago, people scared throughout neighborhoods on the west side, south side, north side. Morale has never been lower with law enforcement and CPD. Record number of police officers leaving the force. We have been hemorrhaging people out of the city of Chicago to the suburbs and elsewhere where they feel safe. Record number of businesses fleeing the city of Chicago. You couple that with record deficits. $2 billion deficit, the $2 billion deficit line of credit that you just had to take out this week. But you've spent $300 million of taxpayer money on illegal immigrants. And when I think about all of those things and I look at the strategy you continue to take, I mean, you're putting the interest of illegal immigrants above the interest of taxpayers in Chicago. But you continue to go down this path, and for the life of me, I can't understand it. So, Mayor, tell me why you continue to put the interests of illegal immigrants above taxpayers in Chicago.
Thank you for your representation. Violent crime is down in Chicago.
Well, let me reclaim my time. So I have a statistic here. Last year, Chicago had 573 murders.
Down.
Okay, but I want to compare that to the city of New York that is almost two-thirds the size of Chicago, 337 murders. So you had 573 murders in the city of Chicago, and you're one-third the size.
That's the lowest amount in 5 years under my leadership.
Okay, and you look at the level of violent criminals, sexual offenses, and drug dealers.
All violent crime is down in Chicago. In fact, just this year alone, Congressman, respectfully, there's a 20% decrease in violent crime in the city of Chicago.
I don't agree with your statistics.
Well, it's not a matter of whether or not you agree with it. It's a matter of whether it's a fact.
Let me reclaim my time, because I thought you might do this. And when I hear your answer, no one in this room should be surprised that your approval rating is 6.6%. Now, that's not just me saying this. Newsweek article, the least popular politician in America is Brandon Johnson. So, recent poll, M3 Strategies conducted this February 20th to 21st, showed that Mayor Johnson has a 6.6% approval rating, the worst showing of any political figure in the country's history. So, I know you're talking about crime is down and things are great and, you know, the city's flush with money. None of that is backed up by the people in the city of Chicago. And so I'm wondering why you continue to go down this path of failed policies, destruction to the city of Chicago, people fleeing, law enforcement at an all-time low. And I'm wondering if you have any remorse for that here today and can tell us why you continue to double down on these failed policies.
We've invested $1.25 billion for housing and economic development, particularly for Black Chicago. It's the largest investment in the history of Chicago. 45% increase in youth employment, particularly for Black and brown children. I will not apologize for my investments in the people of Chicago. We have one of the most diverse economies, the top universities. As violence continues to go down and investments continue to go up, that is what's most important. We've opened up 3 mental health clinics, the first mayor since the first Black mayor in the history of Chicago.
I'm going to reclaim my
invest in,
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to reclaim my time.
In public health, and I will continue to make those investments.
Your approval rating speaks volumes.
Well, the people approve of my investments, and I will continue to make those investments.
You're going the wrong direction. You need to reverse your policies on sanctuary cities. That's what the election results were last year. Crime and immigration were the #1 issue in the election from Republicans, Democrats,
Chairman, the gentleman's time.
We could use your help to actually help us continue to invest in these programs that continue to drive violence down in the city of Chicago, and I'm willing to work with you, and I'm glad I had a chance to finally meet you for the first time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Davis from Illinois.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank you and Ranking Member Connolly.
If the gentleman could speak into the microphone so we can hear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank you and Ranking Member Connolly for letting me participate in today's hearing. I also want to thank all of the witnesses. I served some time as a city councilman, so I know what it looks like to be mayor and what happens. Thank you for your service. As a proud Chicagoan, I stand in support of our city's locally elected leaders, namely Mayor Brandon Johnson, who could be back home serving the residents of Chicago, but instead is here before us today, preserving and protecting the sovereignty of the city of Chicago as a welcoming and humane city. At a time when immigrants are being blanketly labeled as criminals and targeted haphazardly to fuel the Trump-Musk administration's PR-orientated deportation stunt, I'm proud that since the enactment of the Illinois Trust Act in 2017, the state of Illinois, Cook County, and the city of Chicago have maintained an ongoing commitment to welcoming those in need, including those that have endured persecution abroad and pressed their way across borders, looking and longing for a better life for themselves and their families. I think we all agree that immigration has long played an integral role in the development of American society, culture, and its economy. In recognition of such, the city of Chicago is holding true to its values. As Mayor Johnson has stated on several occasions, that Chicago, and I quote, will remain a welcoming city, end of quotation, despite recent and repeated threats and attempts of coercion from the current administration to do otherwise. Likewise, H.R. 32, the supposed No Bailout for Sanctuary Cities Act that undergirds today's hearing, is drafted in the same threatening, intrusive, and non-constructive manner, as the measure unfairly calls for welcoming jurisdictions to be stripped of federal funding that we just heard often goes towards supporting critical public safety initiatives and local programming needs. In fact, I would commend that the bill as drafted infringes on the constitutional balance of power between states and the federal government and will cause more harm than help if enacted. So, Mr. Mayor Johnson of Chicago, the Windy City, the city of the big shoulders, would you share with this committee what principles and concepts guide your thoughts and actions as you go about your task of being mayor for all of these people in Chicago?
Thank you very much, Congressman Davis, for your leadership, and it's good to see my neighbor here today. You know, look, the city of Chicago, we reflect and we represent the best part of America. It's a diverse city, again, a city that was established by a Black Haitian immigrant and a Potawatomi woman, a city that has invited immigrants from around the world, a city that was built by the formerly enslaved, my ancestors. And it's a very proud moment to not only represent the city of Chicago, but it is my honor. What we've experienced over the last 20 months since I've been in office, first of all, the city of Chicago is safer. We have violent crime has gone down in the city of Chicago by over 20% just this year alone. We've invested in housing. We've invested in mental health care. We've invested in youth employment. We've invested in our overall community safety plan, 200 more detectives to solve crime. We are headed in the right direction, and I'm grateful for your leadership, and I will look for this body to continue to support these efforts for all of our cities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Evans from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for allowing me to wave onto this committee. And of course, thank you to the witnesses for taking the time to come and have this conversation. So, Denver Mayor Johnston. I'm a Colorado native, grew up in and around the Denver metro area, also Latino, grandson of an immigrant from Mexico, and I also served for 12 years in the U.S. Army, Colorado Army National Guard, and in the Denver metro area for another 10 years as a police officer. And unfortunately, as a Denver metro area police officer, I've seen firsthand how public safety in Colorado and in Denver is plummeting. When I started my law enforcement career, Colorado was ranked 31st in the nation for our crime rate. We were ranked 3rd in the nation last year. Denver, 6 years ago in 2019, they didn't even make the top 50 most dangerous dangerous cities in the country list. This year in 2024-2025, U.S. News and World Report ranks Denver as the 10th most dangerous city in the country. Denver has twice the homicide rate as San Francisco. We've lost more than 7,000 Coloradans to illegal drug overdose deaths since 2020, with a significant percentage of that coming from illegal drugs like fentanyl. And we know from criminal intelligence that in the Denver, Colorado area, almost all of that fentanyl is being trafficked by illegal transnational criminal organizations, the Jalisco cartel and the Sinaloa cartel. We've seen a massive increase. This is just a recent headline. We've seen an increase in Tusi, which is the drug of choice of Trendy Aragua in the Denver metro area. And we've seen headlines that show that overdose deaths in the Denver metro area remain stubbornly flat despite falling in pretty much everywhere around the country. In terms of violent crimes, Denver's had over 6,400 violent crimes. So that's including things like 689 sexual assaults, over 1,200 robberies, over 4,400 aggravated assaults, and again, depending on which database you look at, anywhere from 65 to 71 homicides. Again, double the homicide rate of San Francisco. So the first question to you is, for those homicides, do you know how many of those were committed by people illegally present in the country?
Thank you, Congressman, and happy to answer that because I think you may have some bad facts. I'm happy to clarify them for you. In terms of what's happening in Denver right now, as we know, crime is down in Denver from last year to this year.
Reclaiming my time, Meyer. Do you know?
I do want to answer the question you phrased.
Reclaiming my time. Do you know how many of those 65 to 71 homicides were committed by people illegally present in the country? And I'm happy to show all of the sources for my facts.
We don't ask anyone's status at point of arrest. We do not know someone's status and when they're charged.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad you've brought that up because, as you can see displayed here, we actually have a training bulletin to the Denver Police Department dated January of this year, which pretty much says what you just said, which is that Denver Police Department is prohibited from asking for any information about the national origin, immigration, or citizenship status of any individual. And that's a problem because of the second item that we're going to display here, which is the standard FBI fingerprint card, something that I filled out for over a decade when I was a police officer, which has those items as mandatory fields, location of birth and then the citizenship. And so I've heard, being a cop in the Denver metro area, that police officers in Denver are being told not to fill out those mandatory fields in the FBI fingerprint card, which could potentially indicate why you're unsure of how many of these crimes are being committed by illegal immigrants in your city. So the second question is, will you allow Denver police officers to fill out all of the information on an FBI fingerprint card to including asking for and recording the citizenship status?
Thank you, Congressman. Right now, under city ordinance, we do not ask someone's status at point of contact, and that does not prejudice in any way our prosecution. We believe it doesn't matter where someone's from,
thank you, Mr.
what crime they've committed.
So you're not
so
you're not filling out the FBI fingerprint card as required?
Right now, we are filling out information when folks arrive, and none of that information prevents us from prosecuting them to the full extent of the law, which is what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So not filling out the FBI fingerprint card, which would directly contradict your statement that you want people who are illegally present in the country and committing crimes to be held to account for those crimes. And I think that the statistics that we've gone through in the space of crime show why Denver is specifically cratering in their public safety statistics as compared to major cities around the country.
That's just factually false.
I can show you my statistics. And as a police officer, I am here to make sure that we are uplifting the voices of the victims of these crimes who are being taken advantage of in communities that provide sanctuary to dangerous illegal criminal gangs like Tren de Aragua, which your jail released just last week. We talked about somebody back into the community. We must take care of our victims. I brought legislation, the Uplift Act, to focus on this. We're here to protect the victims, and Mayor, I would ask you to join me in that.
We've already done that.
Yield
And we'll
back.
keep doing that. Thank you. I'm happy
Chair
to answer.
recognizes Mr. Crank from Colorado.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, wait, one moment.
Just quick UC. I would ask unanimous consent to enter the record an NPR article entitled Criminal Records of January 6 Rioters Pardoned by Trump Include Rape, Domestic Violence. And I would also ask the correspondence between a number of us and the new Attorney General Pamela Bondi be entered into the record at this point.
Without objection, so ordered.
The Chair.
Now, Chair recognizes Mr. Crank from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to wave on. This is a very important issue to the state of Colorado. And Mayor Johnson, thanks for being here. I know for all of you it's been a long day. Appreciate you being here. Mayor Mike Johnston, Denver has an ordinance that prohibits city and county employees from assisting in the enforcement of federal immigration laws or inquiring about a person's immigration status. We've just talked about that. The city of Denver also has a legal defense fund to support individuals facing deportation. Denver's received more than 41,000 illegal aliens over the past 2 years, and due to its sanctuary status, has become a popular destination for illegal aliens. It's estimated that Denver spends more than $180 million a year supporting illegal immigrants. And in rare cases where ICE is able to apprehend an illegal immigrant in Denver jails, Denver forbids that transfer from taking place in the jail. Now, I just did a ride-along with El Paso County Sheriffs. That's my home county. Colorado Springs, just an hour away. I just did a ride-along with them for the safety of their officers, and the ICE officials. The community and the detainee do transfers in the jail with El Paso County officers present and with the handcuffs on. Now, that El Paso County method has never, ever resulted in the injury of an officer during the transfer. However, in Denver, you require that Denver Police Department release Tren de Aragua gang members to the quote-unquote streets, uncuffed, and hope that ICE agents aren't able to apprehend them on their own. That's the hope. Let's just be honest. With no Denver Police Department officer there to assist if the situation turns violent, that's irresponsible. And to be clear, there's no federal law that forces you to do it this way, Mr. Mayor. This policy and the danger that it creates is wholly a result of your policy as the city and county of Denver. Just last week, it resulted in an illegal Tren de Aragua member assaulting and biting an ICE agent because he was uncuffed and he was released by Denver to a parking lot. Now, you're putting police officers who you're sworn to help protect as their mayor at risk to score political points. And I think it's outrageous. It's unbecoming to your office, and it's a danger to the people of Colorado and the citizens of Denver. Now, we have this case, and I know you've talked about it today. Abraham Gonzalez, suspected TDA gang member, released from Denver County Jail, as I mentioned, due to Colorado's sanctuary policies. This is a post by ICE. Was forced to arrest him in public. ICE was forced to arrest him in public where he assaulted officers, sanctuary policies, endanger communities, and law enforcement. That's their post. I'd ask that this be entered into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Objection, so ordered.
Mr. Mayor, yes or no? Would you feel safe if you were alone in a parking lot with a Tren de Aragua gang member?
We did not put a situation where someone
Just yes or no. Would you feel safe if you were in a parking lot alone with the Tren de Aragua member, like you make your police officers do, or like you make an ICE agent do? Yes or no?
There were 6 ICE agents on the scene.
Could you answer my question? Would you feel safe
without any weapons?
Would you
in
feel
a
safe?
secure location
Reclaiming my time. Thank you.
with
Would
a fence around
Coloradans, reclaiming my time, Mr. Mayor, you're not going to answer the question. Would Coloradans be safer if ICE had full cooperation from Denver to remove Tren de Aragua gang members? Yes or no?
We currently honor those notification requests. We've done it 1,226 times. This is the first time I've ever been aware of there being an incident, which is why I reached out to ICE yesterday.
Full cooperation would be allowing them to come into the jail and doing it in the jail, not in the parking lot. Will you change that? For the safety of your officers and those ICE agents, would you change that?
I reached out to the ICE officers as soon as I heard about this. I have a meeting with them in the coming weeks to talk about the procedure. We have 2 jails. 90% of the pickups are from the other jail where we've never had an occurrence.
Would you change it?
And so I'm going to sit down with the ICE officers and see if they're
It's just common sense. You don't do a transfer in the middle of a parking lot when you can do it in a jail. It's common sense. It's common sense.
It's been common sense 1,226 times it's worked, and so we're going to figure out what happens.
Mr. Mayor, is your highest priority as mayor the citizens, the safety of the citizens of Denver?
My priority as mayor is to protect public safety for all of our residents.
Last question. Have you apologized to the federal law enforcement agent who was assaulted by a Trinidad Agua gang member because of your failed leadership? Yes or no?
I reached out to the ICE officers yesterday, and I've asked to sit down with them to talk about this procedure and how we can align systems to make sure no other officers get injured.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From what I gathered from this hearing, the term sanctuary cities seems to mean a sanctuary only for criminals. Throughout this hearing, we have heard countless examples of illegal immigrants with criminal histories being allowed to roam free in these cities and continue to commit crimes and violence against American citizens that should never have happened. The bottom line is that sanctuary policies are a violation of federal immigration laws. The states, when they enacted the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, made it very clear that it's in the purview of the federal government, not the states, to determine these policies. States shouldn't be flaunting our laws that they gave us the sole responsibility to implement. And yet Chicago, Denver, New York City, and Boston are aiding and abetting in the furtherance of laws and policies that are in direct defiance of the immigration laws that are passed by Congress. This hearing is important for us as Congress to determine ways in which we can use our constitutional powers, such as the power of the purse, to force these and other sanctuary cities into compliance. My first question, I want to ask Mr. Byer. You haven't had a lot of questions today, right?
Not enough.
I want to ask, okay, so are you aware of how much it costs the American taxpayer per illegal immigrant in the United States, roughly?
Not on a per capita basis, no.
Okay. The Budget Committee has determined it's almost about $9,000 in net loss per per illegal immigrant.
That's definitely not correct.
Okay, you can question, but that's the group that did the research. So let me ask you this. Does Cato support subsidizing, creating taxpayer programs to subsidize other people's health care benefits?
No, we don't.
Okay. Does Cato support using taxpayer dollars to support people staying in hotels?
Definitely not.
Okay, just wanted to get that cleared up because I was worried where Cato stood. Mr. Adams, you stated that the migrant crisis. Wait, first I want to ask this question from everybody on the panel. Is there a difference between, if there's a difference between the ICE detainer and a criminal warrant, which one would you honor?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You said there's a difference between an ICE detainer and a criminal warrant?
Yes.
We would always honor an ICE detainer that comes with a judicial warrant. That is what the law calls for in the city.
Okay, and do you concur? Is that what you would do?
We always support our criminal warrants with ICE requests, yes.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
With a criminal warrant, our local police department, with a criminal warrant, will collaborate and cooperate with federal agents.
And Mrs. Wu?
Whenever there's a criminal warrant from any agency, Boston Police enforce it.
Okay. Mr. Johnson, I'm concerned about what's happening, obviously, my neighboring state of Illinois. But you said that you're prepared, let's see, you said that you oppose proposals to eliminate sanctuary protections for illegal immigrants that are convicted of serious crimes. Why do you think it's important to protect even violent criminals?
We do not protect violent criminals. In fact, my top priority is to make sure that the people of Chicago are safe. Our local law enforcement work hard every single day to ensure that. That's why I invested in more detectives so that we can actually solve crime. And as a result of the work that I've done in my leadership, crime has gone down since I've been mayor.
Mrs. Wu, you've said multiple times, you made it very clear that you're a welcoming city, knowing that there is a cost to the taxpayer. What's the acceptable number? Is there any acceptable or reasonable limit that you would consider before your city is overrun?
We are a city that is the safest in the country because everyone feels connected to city services. Everyone can call 911.
You have no answer. There's no capacity that's too
Congressman, respectfully, I'm the mayor of Boston. I don't get to decide who comes into our country and where they go after that. Our job is to keep people fed and healthy and safe when they arrive in our city. And we do that in order to make sure that everyone across our community is safe. Resources are strained, but I would ask you to please do your job and be part of passing bipartisan legislation that would allow us to do what
we passed HR 2, but what's been made very clear is that we don't need to pass laws. All we need is a new president. My time has expired.
Gentlemen, time's expired. They've called for votes, but we have one last question. Mr. Hurd from Colorado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Mayor Johnston, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming. I have a question about Denver's policies that I fear have made it a magnet for migrants and have drawn tens of thousands to Denver in a short amount of time. Given the strain that's being placed on city resources, is there a limit, and this might be similar to a question that was just asked before, if another wave of arrivals begins, does Denver have a contingency plan, or is the commitment to being a sanctuary city truly open-ended no matter how many come?
Thank you, Congressman. And we have adjusted our policies when we were facing some of the fiscal crisis around this. We were hoping for the Senate bipartisan immigration bill to pass, which would have provided some resources to interior cities. When that didn't, we had to make adjustments. And so what we've done now is we've really focused on connecting people to work. So those folks that arrive, we think the most important thing is for them to be able to work and support themselves, pay their own taxes, pay their own rent. And so we've run work authorization clinics to help people get legal work authorization. If this body could help us accelerate the rate of work authorization, we would not need to spend any public resources at all because folks want jobs they could support themselves. So that's been our real focus. The more folks we work authorized, we've been able to then need to provide fewer resources around housing, shelter, food, et cetera.
Are you concerned that Denver could be reaching a breaking point soon?
Thank you, Congressman. We actually are seeing dramatic drops in arrivals since June of 2024. So we are not in a moment of crisis right now. We don't have migrant encampments. We've closed all of our shelters. We've actually dropped our spending on migrant supports by 90% from 2024 to 2025. So our expenditures are down dramatically, and we'd love to see it stay that way.
How about my concern about incentivizing certain actions? Do you have any concrete evidence that sanctuary policies have not made Denver more vulnerable to crime?
Thank you, Congressman. We do have concrete evidence that even as 42,000 newcomers have arrived in the city over the last 18 months, crime has gone down in Denver. And so shootings are down 24%, homicide is down 17%, auto theft is down almost 30%. So we've seen all those major drivers go down. At the same time, we've had new folks arrive.
And that's because of the sanctuary policies or in spite of them, or what would those numbers be absent the policies in Denver that incentivize these behaviors?
Thank you, Congressman. We see them as unrelated. We are continuing to make a strong stand on public safety. We're continuing to find ways to integrate folks who have arrived on our city in the middle of the winter with no clothes or support, and we've been able to do both. We've also made historic reductions in homelessness at the same time that we were facing this. I declared an emergency on homelessness because that was our top priority, and we've become the largest big city in America to end the cycle of street homelessness for veterans. So that's been equal part of our focus at the same time.
So just so I'm clear on your testimony, you don't believe that there's any evidence that the city of Denver's policies have made Denver more vulnerable to crime?
No, sir, I do not see any evidence that it has.
Okay. If violent criminals are exploiting these protections, are you willing to reconsider aspects of the city's policies to prioritize public safety?
Thank you, sir. We are very aggressively pursuing violent criminals right now. In fact, we're doing it in collaboration with many federal agencies. We have a Raven task force we launched, which has been focused on disrupting gang activity. That's why we've been so successful in managing and reducing the presence of TDA in the city. It's how we helped reduce the presence of MS-13. So we have aggressive actions going here and partner with federal agents, and that's working.
One of the concerns that I've heard, Mayor Johnston, in Western Colorado and Colorado's 3rd Congressional District and also in Southern Colorado is that there are illegal immigrants here that are coming to, or that are in Denver that are then relocating to Western and Southern Colorado. Are you aware, or can you confirm that the illegal migrants that are in Denver, that were in Denver, have stayed in your city and have not traveled to other parts of the state?
Thank you, sir. Obviously, as you know, when folks arrive to Denver, whether they come from Carbondale or Grand Junction or Chicago, we don't track where they go. It's a free country. If they choose to move to Lakewood or to move to Pueblo, we wouldn't know. We just provide the emergency services to make sure they're not freezing on the streets. And so that's our focus, but we don't track anyone's long-term trajectory, whether they're a native-born or an immigrant.
Would it surprise you if there were individuals that were leaving Denver that were relocating to other parts of Colorado?
It wouldn't surprise me that folks were moving in the same way it doesn't surprise us that folks are constantly relocating to Denver from other parts of the country as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor Johnston. Mr. Chairman, I see my time has almost expired, and I yield the remainder back.
Well, thank you very much, and that's it. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and believe it or not, this is the best behaved this committee's been all Congress. So I want to compliment my ranking member, Mr. Conley, and again, thank you for your testimony today. I look forward to further discussion. With that and without objection, all members have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Live on WBZ TV and streaming on CBS News Boston. WBZ News starts now with a next weather alert.
Now on WBZ, this next weather alert for a spring-like storm system heading our way that will bring some downpours and gusty winds. And with all the snow melt, we could see some localized flooding. So be looking for that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Paula Eben. This storm is expected to arrive later this evening, and WBZ meteorologist Jason Michaels here with our next weather alert. We say spring-like because here we are in the mid-50s, Jason.
Absolutely. Yes, we have temperatures already at 55 degrees in the city of Boston right now. And look at the hefty cloud cover that we have moving east out into the harbor as of right now. Check out these temperatures. You think this is something that we're expecting in mid to late April? It's happening in early March. 56 right now over in Bedford, still right around 50 degrees in Worcester, and almost at 60 degrees at this hour south in Norwood. We keep the cloud cover around throughout the course of the afternoon, all because we're sort of also transporting some extra humidity in the atmosphere. That's also aiding and abetting to some of the cloud cover really amplifying. Heaviest rain is going to arrive after the midnight hour. Now check this out. This is a multi-state sort of storm system. We had tornado warnings earlier this morning down in South Carolina. They've now moved a little bit farther up to the north there in Virginia. Still hefty amounts of rain showers going to be moving eastbound right into the region as we get past the sunset hour later on this evening. And even some of the sparse shower activity right now is not that far outside of the Commonwealth. We even had some earlier morning showers just about a couple hours or so ago. For the rest of the afternoon, just still dealing with cloud cover. Rain is arriving after the 7 p.m. hour, and there's also a coastal flood alert. We'll tell you exactly where those locations will be impacted coming up in a few moments. Paula?
All right, Jason, thanks so much. Breaking news right now. There's an active crime scene going on right now in the town of Boylston. This is in the area of Central Street and French Drive. State police say they were called there to a home on Central Street this morning about reports of shots fired. Initially, Boylston police put out a description of someone they were looking for in this area and say they were armed and dangerous. Right now, police say there is no threat to the public. We are waiting to learn more from police. We have a crew headed to the scene. Let's turn now to Capitol Hill. Thanks. Well, the Supreme Court rejected a Trump administration push to freeze billions of dollars in foreign aid approved by Congress. By a 5-4 vote, the court refused to block a lower court's order which required the administration to release nearly $2 billion in aid for work that had already been done. There is new reason to question the Trump administration's plans for federal buildings like the JFK and O'Neill buildings in Boston. Yesterday, the administration posted a list of hundreds of buildings which could be sold. But now that list is gone, with a post on the website which says only coming soon. And the blogger known as Turtle Boy will appear in court this afternoon as well to try to have criminal charges against him dismissed. Aidan Carney is arguing that witness intimidation charges he faces in connection with his coverage of the Reid trial should be dismissed on account of the First Amendment. Carney is facing 16 charges, including witness intimidation and conspiracy. Prosecutors argue that Carney harassed witnesses in the murder prosecution of Reid. A 22-year-old man has been charged with killing his mother in their home in Avon. And as WBZ's Penny Commit shows us, police say he has admitted to the crime.
This is so funny. All I had to do was kill my mom, and then this is it.
An alleged confession read aloud in Stoughton District Court Wednesday. Prosecutors say 23-year-old Thaddeus Joseph killed his 53-year-old mother, Astrid, inside of their shared home in Avon, and then admitted to it after he was arrested and being booked.
He was acting somewhat erratically during booking.
Has Thaddeus struggled with mental health before?
I'm not going to make any comments right now about kind of what's going on.
Richard Gideon was one of several friends and family members inside the courtroom forced to hear the state's gruesome timeline of events. According to the prosecution, Thaddeus told his parents on Saturday that he was experiencing anxiety and having thoughts of self-harm. On Tuesday, Thaddeus took a mental health day from work. He was home with his mom when around 10 a.m., Astrid allegedly called her husband, who could hear the two arguing through the phone.
He heard the defendant say, "I have your phone." He then heard his wife respond saying, "I'm your mother, give me the phone." The phone then disconnected.
Prosecutors say the father then raced home to find Astrid's body laying on the kitchen floor and the family car gone. Thaddeus, a recent UMass Lowell graduate, was found a few hours later, a horrible tragedy that seemingly no one saw coming.
Very, very peaceful, quiet family, yes.
Thaddeus is being held without bail, which his attorney did not argue, saying that he has experienced some recent mental health and family issues. He's due back in court April 10th. In Stoughton, I'm Penny Commit, WBZ News.
Today, Archbishop Richard Henning is leading his first Ash Wednesday services as the head of the Boston Archdiocese. He's now presiding over Mass and the distribution of ashes at St. Francis Chapel at the Prudential Center. And then at 7 o'clock tonight, he will preside over Mass in Portuguese at St. Tarcisius in Framingham. The Archdiocese says today's collection will be dedicated to the work of Catholic Charities of Boston, which helps serve the most vulnerable. Pope Francis is not presiding over Ash Wednesday services at the Vatican as he continues to battle double pneumonia. He's still in stable condition, but he will wear a ventilation mask at night to help him breathe. The Pope has been in the hospital for almost 3 weeks now, and doctors say his prognosis remains guarded, meaning he is not out of danger. Coming up here on WBZ News, a policy reversal gets pushed back. Why Target is now facing a consumer boycott.
There's no boycott. It's spring temperatures. We have widespread 50s outside right now, and I think we're likely going to do it again tomorrow. And actually, we may be towards the highest end of the 50-degree sort of threshold. We'll talk about the overnight rain chances and the potential impacts for us here in southern New England straight ahead.
WBZ's Next Weather Alert is brought to you by Safety Insurance. You're watching WBZ News.
We'll take a look here. Some video from a police chase in Oxford. Police say these officers in Charlton were after a suspect who failed to stop. So the chase spilled into the center of Oxford. You can see the suspect drive right into traffic and then onto a parking lot. Police were eventually able to catch that suspect. CCTV video shows a tornado striking the city of Hugo in Oklahoma, stripping the roof right off a building in its path. This veterinary clinic, which captured the video, said that the tornado had hit the clinic and surrounding buildings. According to the National Weather Service, the tornado reached peak winds of more than 100 miles an hour and remained on the ground for almost 4 minutes. Which would feel like an eternity, Jason, at 100 miles an hour. Here, we're having incredibly nice temperatures this afternoon.
Yeah, we're sort of in the pause before the activity really starts to go downhill. We are still expecting severe weather outside of this system to move eastbound across the mid-Atlantic and eventually move out into the ocean. Meanwhile, we're going to be left with spring-like conditions and plenty of wet weather arriving overnight tonight. It's really actually not that far away. We had a good sort of shower that moved through earlier this morning between, let's say, 8 and perhaps even 10 a.m. The next round of rain is going to be arriving past about dinner time later on this evening. Meanwhile, snow showers in areas north and also west of town, back over towards the upper Midwest. There is the activity in terms of severe weather right now is actually just to the south of D.C. That is actually a tornado warning. So we're going to be watching that and see what trends there. Meanwhile, back up to the north, we still have plenty of cloudy skies outside, and other than a few sprinkles over the course of the next several hours or so. After we go to bed overnight tonight, Western Mass is going to start to light up on the radar. Worcester, you really start to get in on the activity past 9 p.m., between 9 p.m. and perhaps even midnight, and inside 495 getting into the city of Boston. This is going to be a pretty hefty amount of rain moving through everybody. You can see where we sort of have that linear line of orange. That's indicating some heavier rain, and I think no doubt we're likely going to have some strong winds push east out into the ocean and even the harbor region thereafter. 12 a.m. to about 2 a.m., the South Shore, perhaps even the Cape and the islands, will still be dealing with some moderate to heavy rain showers. The outer Cape is likely still going to be dealing with some of those shower activity through about 4, maybe even 5 a.m. at the very latest, and then all of that activity lifts north and outside of the region. For the first half of our Thursday, will be cloudy. For the latter half, we'll start to usher in a little bit of sunshine. For the rest of the afternoon, mainly cloudy skies. You can see the timeline after 7 p.m. We're still likely going to be hanging out in the mid to low 50s throughout the rest of the evening hours. And as we go to bed overnight tonight, winds are also going to be starting to pop as well, which is why we're going to have that strong southerly gust to allow for some coastal flooding issues. Around a half foot up to up to a foot of inundation in some of the lowest lying areas. Lighter amounts of rain south and east of town, heavier amounts of rain north and also west of the Mass Pike. 1 to 1.5 inches. Just look at the sheer size of this system. Not only are we raking in a lot of moisture coming in from the area south, we're also having 2 different air masses just kind of sort of clash east of the Mississippi, which is allowing for some scattered snow showers, plenty of severe weather to the south, but also plenty of warm and also heavy rain up to the north as well. These are dual areas of low pressure. Once one moves on out, we have to allow this second one to wrap around the much colder and also drier air, and that takes shape as we get towards Friday of this week. Still likely to be breezy for our Friday, which is why we're going to be sort of back into the lower 40s. Meanwhile, wind chills on Friday will likely feel like the mid to upper 30s. Same goes for Saturday. Still dry and also with a lot of sunshine. West winds at 20 to 25. A little bit lighter, as you can see there, for Sunday, right around 40 degrees after beginning into the lower 20s. And as we flip the clocks forward and become a little bit used to adding a little bit of extra hour of daylight on Monday, we'll be in the lower 40s and mid to low 50s for Tuesday. Paula?
Jason, thank you. Target is facing a 40-day consumer boycott over the company's shift away from diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. The boycott was started by a prominent Atlanta area megachurch pastor, and this comes more than a month after Target announced that it was making changes to its DEI programs. The company was once a leading advocate for DEI initiatives in the business world. The boycott also comes as Target is facing pressure from tariffs and a consumer pullback. Up next on WBZ News, we go up close and personal with our friends at the Franklin Park Zoo. Well, what a way to start the day. Today, we woke up with the animals at Boston's Franklin Park Zoo. And what's a gorilla or a pygmy hippo like first thing in the morning? They can be a little cranky or they can be nice. WBC's Levin Reed found out.
Nighttime is the right time at the Franklin Park Zoo. That's why getting a chance to visit the tropical forest this morning was so special.
It's a very unique time. A lot of people don't get to see this opportunity, so you see animals that are awake and active when normally they're asleep during the day, like our bats.
Sure. This area is full of adventure and wonder.
I think this is a lot of visitors' favorite part of the zoo, getting to walk through this building. It is just such a magical place full of so many different species.
Many of the animals and displays in the tropical forest have their own story. I'm afraid of snakes, but the 38-year-old python named A made the interview easy.
She's been a long-term resident of Franklin Park Zoo here in the tropical forest. Ball pythons are really easygoing temperament animals, so they're easy to handle, and they're a great snake to get over your fear with.
Millie the bear tapir was born here.
She is 4.5 years old now. Her mom, Abby, is here at the zoo as well. She just celebrated her 21st birthday yesterday, which is really exciting.
And nothing is cooler than getting a chance to watch an anteater eat all the bugs through a tube.
They have really sticky saliva, so all the bugs are going to stick to his tongue, and he's going to take them in that way.
Also, the temperature is right, so the Orchid Adventure exhibit flourishes in this space.
We have a whole bunch of different types, like these Pathelopedilums. These are slipper orchids. We have a lot of dendrobiums as well here. Brassias, one of my favorite.
You haven't seen anything until you witness the march of the gorillas in their habitat.
They're one of our most popular animals for guests to watch and experience. They're social, dynamic, smart animals, incredible to work with.
The tropical forest at the Franklin Park Zoo is open all year round. In Boston, I'm Levin Reed, WBZ News.
Still ahead, we'll tell you when you can get a free ice cream cone from Ben & Jerry's. Well, we really want to think spring around here, and Ben & Jerry's announced Free Cone Day. Put it on your calendar. It's Tuesday, April 8th. The company's CEO says the tradition is a way to thank customers and spread joy around the world. Last year, Ben & Jerry's served up more than 1 million scoops of free ice cream and joy. Thanks for joining us. The news continues streaming on CBS News Boston. Have a great afternoon. I'll see you again tomorrow morning with Chris Tanaka and Jason Michael and Brianna Pitts at 5 a.m.
Live on WBZ TV and streaming on CBS News Boston. WBZ News starts now with a next weather alert.
Now on WBZ, this next weather alert for a spring-like storm system heading our way that will bring some downpours and gusty winds. And with all the snow melt, we could see some localized flooding. So be looking for that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Paula Eben. This storm is expected to arrive later this evening, and WBZ meteorologist Jason Michael's here with our next weather alert. We say spring-like because here we are in the mid-50s, Jason.
Absolutely. Yes, we have temperatures already at 55 degrees in the city of Boston right now. And look at the hefty cloud cover that we have moving east out into the harbor as of right now. Check out these temperatures. You think this is something that we're expecting in mid to late April? It's happening in early March. 56 right now over in Bedford, still right around 50 degrees in Worcester, and almost at 60 degrees at this hour south in Norwood. We keep the cloud cover around throughout the course of the afternoon, all because we're sort of also transporting some extra humidity in the atmosphere. That's also aiding and abetting to some of the cloud cover really amplifying. Heaviest rain is going to arrive after the midnight hour. Now check this out. This is a multi-state sort of storm system. We had tornado warnings earlier this morning down in South Carolina. They've now moved a little bit farther up to the north there in Virginia. Still hefty amounts of rain showers going to be moving eastbound right into the region as we get past the sunset hour later on this evening. And even some of the sparse shower activity right now is not that far outside of the Commonwealth. We even had some earlier morning showers earlier, just about a couple hours hours or so ago. For the rest of the afternoon, just still dealing with cloud cover. Rain is arriving after the 7 p.m. hour, and there's also a coastal flood alert. We'll tell you exactly where those locations will be impacted coming up in a few moments. Paula?
All right, Jason, thanks so much. Breaking news right now. There's an active crime scene going on right now in the town of Boylston. This is in the area of Central Street and French Drive. State police say they were called there to a home on Central Street this morning about reports of shots fired. Initially, Boylston police put out a description of someone they were looking for in this area and say they were armed and dangerous. Right now, police say there is no threat to the public. We are waiting to learn more from police. We have a crew headed to the scene. Let's turn now to Capitol Hill. Thanks. Well, the Supreme Court rejected a Trump administration push to freeze billions of dollars in foreign aid approved by Congress. By a 5-4 vote, the court refused to block a lower court's order which required the administration to release nearly $2 billion in aid for work that had already been done. There is new reason to question the Trump administration's plans for federal buildings like the JFK and O'Neill buildings in Boston. Yesterday, the administration posted a list of hundreds of buildings which could be sold. But now that list is gone, with a post on the website which says only coming soon. And the blogger known as Turtle Boy will appear in court this afternoon as well to try to have criminal charges against him dismissed. Aidan Carney is arguing that witness intimidation charges he faces in connection with his coverage of the Reid trial should be dismissed on account of the First Amendment. Carney is facing 16 charges, including witness intimidation and conspiracy. Prosecutors argue that Carney harassed witnesses in the murder prosecution of Reid. A 22-year-old man has been charged with killing his mother in their home in Avon. And as WBZ's Penny Commit shows us, police say he has admitted to the crime.
This is so funny. All I had to do was kill my mom, and then this is it.
An alleged confession read aloud in Stoughton District Court Wednesday. Prosecutors say 23-year-old Thaddeus Joseph killed his 53-year-old mother, Astrid, inside of their shared home in Avon, and then admitted to it after he was arrested and being booked.
He was acting somewhat erratically during booking.
Has Thaddeus struggled with mental health before?
I'm not going to make any comments right now about kind of what's going on.
Richard Gideon was one of several friends and family members inside the courtroom forced to hear the state's gruesome timeline of events. According to the prosecution, Thaddeus told his parents on Saturday that he was experiencing anxiety and having thoughts of self-harm. On Tuesday, Thaddeus took a mental health day from work. He was home with his mom when around 10 a.m., Astrid allegedly called her husband, who could hear the two arguing through the phone.
He heard the defendant say, "I have your phone." He then heard his wife respond saying, "I'm your mother, give me the phone." The phone then disconnected.
Prosecutors say the father then raced home to find Astrid's body laying on the kitchen floor and the family car gone. Thaddeus, a recent UMass Lowell graduate, was found a few hours later, a horrible tragedy that seemingly no one saw coming.
Very, very peaceful, quiet family, yes.
Thaddeus is being held without bail, which his attorney did not argue, saying that he has experienced some recent mental health and family issues. He's due back in court April 10th. In Stoughton, I'm Penny Commit, WBZ News.
Today, Archbishop Richard Henning is leading his first Ash Wednesday services as the head of the Boston Archdiocese. He's now presiding over Mass and the distribution of ashes at St. Francis Chapel at the Prudential Center. And then at 7 o'clock tonight, he will preside over Mass in Portuguese at St. Tarcisius in Framingham. The Archdiocese says today's collection will be dedicated to the work of Catholic Charities of Boston, which help serve the most vulnerable. Pope Francis is not presiding over Ash Wednesday services at the Vatican as he continues to battle double pneumonia. He's still in stable condition, but he will wear a ventilation mask at night to help him breathe. The Pope has been in the hospital for almost 3 weeks now, and doctors say his prognosis remains guarded, meaning he is not out of danger. Coming up here on WBZ News, a policy reversal gets pushed back. Why Target is now facing a consumer boycott.
There's no boycott of spring temperatures. We have widespread 50s outside right now, and I think we're likely going to do it again tomorrow. And actually, we may be towards the highest end of the 50-degree sort of threshold. We'll talk about the overnight rain chances and the potential impacts for us here in southern New England straight ahead.
WBZ's Next Weather Alert is brought to you by Safety Insurance. You're watching WBZ News.
We'll take a look here. Some video from a police chase in Oxford. Police say these officers in Charlton were after a suspect who failed to stop. So the chase spilled into the center of Oxford. You can see the suspect drive right into traffic and then onto a parking lot. Police were eventually able to catch that suspect. CCTV video shows a tornado striking the city of Hugo in Oklahoma, stripping the roof right off a building in its path. This veterinary clinic, which captured the video, said that the tornado had hit the clinic and surrounding buildings. According to the National Weather Service, the tornado reached peak winds of more than 100 miles an hour and remained on the ground for almost 4 minutes. which would feel like an eternity, Jason, at 100 miles an hour. Here, we're having incredibly nice temperatures this afternoon.
Yeah, we're sort of in the pause before the activity really starts to go downhill. We are still expecting severe weather outside of the system to move eastbound across the mid-Atlantic and eventually move out into the ocean. Meanwhile, we're going to be left with spring-like conditions and plenty of wet weather arriving overnight tonight. It's really actually not that far away. We had a good sort of shower that moved through earlier this morning between, let's say, 8 and perhaps even 10 a.m. The next round of rain is going to be arriving past about dinner time later on this evening. Meanwhile, snow showers in areas north and also west of town, back over towards the upper Midwest. There is the activity in terms of severe weather right now is actually